Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Devin Allen, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Pastor Doug Widger from the Grace Lutheran Church in Arlington. Thank you for coming out today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Almighty God, we thank you for this day. We thank you that you are everywhere, always working at once. And in this moment, we ask that you would work in this room, that you would bring a spirit of humility and wisdom, of discernment, that all that would be done here today would bless the people of this county. They would continue to prosper, and that this would be a place of orderly governance. We ask it in the strong name of Jesus. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Pastor. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, several announcements as it relates to the agenda. First of all, under the County Administrator Section Item 7A2, we have a court communication, an additional court communication in your red folder as it relates to that particular issue, so we're going to be asking for a court action when we get to item number 2. Also, we're going to take several items out of order. We have 2 briefing items this morning, one dealing obviously with the health-related issues, and the other is a transportation bond discussion that we'd like to have with the court this morning. What we're going to do is as soon as we get to the administrator section, we're going to go to the briefing agenda, and we're going to do transportation first. And that way we can have as full a discussion as the court would like on that particular item. Mr. Skinner is going to be making that presentation. Once that's over with, we will then go to Dr. Tenaja's presentation as it relates to public health. Also, I'd like to remind the court that this afternoon at 2 o'clock we have the IT Steering Committee. It's over at the Family Law Center. And we're not finished with Commissioner's Court yet. By 2 o'clock, the IT Steering Committee will convene after the Commissioner's Court meeting today. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of October the 13th.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Fickus and Commissioner Brooks. There you go. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We did not have any proclamations this morning, but I'll ask if anyone has any announcements that they wish to make at this time.
Yes, go vote.
I agree with that. I would remind everybody that we are, for our United Way project, as opposed to each one of us individually having our own little events, that we're putting together an auction, and so we are in the process right now of acquiring auction items. If anyone else in the county wishes to contribute items to this auction, they're welcome to do so. The auction will start on November the 6th and will go through November the 20th. I know Natalie in my office has already brought in a piece of stained glass, as well as some other items that are being donated. So if anybody has something that they would like to put in with the with this online auction, then you might see someone in my office, and we'll take care of getting it lined out there. Any announcements from either of y'all?
Yes, well, I think Commissioner Brooks alluded to it. Basically, the message is go vote, but I did want to be sure to mention that I know my office, starting last week, of course, received a lot of input from voters about their experience thus far. Obviously, now we're in the second week of early vote. We'll be sending out an update in terms of what we, some observations we've made and some things that we've been able to determine for that, for some of the wait times that people have experienced. But I just wanted to express my thanks for folks giving us input and letting us know how things are going. I know that the elections administration and staff are working tremendously hard. I also know that as important as voting is, that we want to make sure that folks don't have to wait so long to vote. And so there are many factors to that, I think, and some of it obviously we won't really be able to get into the weeds of it until after Election Day, when we can really examine some of the data. But I did just want, and I know we have an agenda item further on where we're going to be discussing some changes, potential changes to the early vote schedule. But I did just want to be sure to remind everybody that, of course, we are in the second week of early vote. Again, thank everyone for providing their input. It's important. And because of that input, we've already been able to make some changes, and hopefully we'll continue to move forward in making the voting experience as pleasant as possible here in Tarrant County. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Judge, may I extend my remarks on the subject? Our early voting locations will be open this coming Sunday from 11 to 4 this coming Sunday. This will be our traditional Souls to the Polls Sunday. We are asking all pastors and ecclesiastical leaders to lead your congregations to the polls on Sunday, this coming Sunday, the 25th, for Souls to the Polls Sunday. Thank you.
I think the polls are also open this Saturday, and I think the Saturday time is 7 to 7 or 7 to 7? 7 to 7. So we are experiencing quite a few folks getting out to vote. That's good. We want to get as many out to vote, certainly during the early voting, and hopefully that will mean that the lines are not going to be as long. And I know Hyder's going to be up here in a few minutes on Election Day, but again, I would remind everybody, you can go to the website and you can look and determine where the lines may not be as long, and therefore go to places and not have to wait as long in line. If there's nothing else, then Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, if we can go now to the briefing agenda. This will be item B in briefing. This concerns the transportation bond program discussion. Just a quick note before Mr. Skinner comes up and begins the presentation. In your packet, in your red folder this morning, you should have a package of the slides, or deck of the slides. When we initially published the slides, apparently the last two had been blocked, and that on the online version was not available. We've sent that out to both Commissioner Allen and Commissioner Johnson this morning via email. So you will, and we'll also have it up on the screen whenever we get to those two particular items. I just wanted to make that notation so that people didn't think we were coming to the end of the slide deck without, and then we had two additional slides. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Skinner, our Director of Transportation Services, to come forward and begin the presentation.
Morning, Judge, Commissioners.
Morning.
So a few months ago, the Commissioners Court had a discussion regarding the potential transportation bond program, the next one. Certainly, other circumstances have been taking center stage, but you reached out to us again and wanted to follow up on the discussion. And so today I'll provide you with some ideas and some thoughts about what that next transportation bond program might look like, and then seek your feedback on that. So what is the reason? Why would we have a transportation bond program? Likely it's for the same reasons that the voters approved our 06 bond program. There's a transportation challenge, and Tarrant County, and as you're well aware, is one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. In fact, we're estimated our population estimates be over 3 million by 2045. And I took a look at 2005 and compared the population estimate from Tarrant County from 2005 to 2020. And just from my brief look at it, it looks like we were increasing by 30%. It's a pretty strong increase in population just in that short of time. But infrastructure is a high dollar, big ticket item. And so a lot of local governments are struggling with the capacity and the ability to deliver on some of these transportation projects. Texas Department of Transportation.
Hold on just 1 second, because Commissioner Brooks
I'm sorry.
monitor is on, but it's not on.
You're to be here in a second.
I made the mistake of moving it.
Oh, okay.
It said no sync. Thank you, sir.
Continue.
Very well. So a lot of our communities and the Texas Department of Transportation, we don't have unlimited funds, and so it's always a challenge to try to meet the need. The sources of those funds are uncertain, especially in a pandemic. We're seeing gas tax, fuel taxes, revenues are not what they used to be. Sales tax is not what it used to be, and it may have an impact on the availability of those funding sources. So what we did, we took a look at the purpose of this program, and we just basically, I just took the same statement that we used in 2006 and applied it here. As we go through and have our discussion today, we may make some revisions to it. But basically our program elements that we'll talk about today are the goals and the structure of the program, the criteria that we would want to use, the evaluation and selection, how we'd want to go about that, and then the implementation of the program itself. So before we get too much into that, let's take a look at our current program just as a quick summary. We'll go through this pretty quickly. But in 2006, we asked that projects be submitted that mitigated congestion, had an air quality improvement aspect to it, had safety elements. We looked to be able to leverage our funding to advance some of the state highway projects. It was a $200 million project, which we've been able to fund, and well over 100 projects, and a lot of those are already complete. And the majority of our funds are allocated to the local arterial intersection improvements. Some of those are on system, some of those are the projects that are within the municipalities. Originally, in our 06 program, we had a allocation that was set aside for a transit initiative, but through Commissioners Court action, those funds were reallocated to a roadway project, and so we're winding up with the allocation that you see there. 20% was set aside for discretionary.
Well, that's because the way we originally did it, we did not write it in such a way as that we could spend it. Unfortunately, we didn't realize this. It wasn't called to our attention by the attorney until after we had already pass the project. So I'm not sure we can't do something about that this time, but that just means that's something we need to be aware of.
We'll look at it.
It wasn't this attorney, it was that attorney. The one that's no longer here.
And so for those municipal projects that we ask the cities to provide to us, we required that they have a city council resolution. We asked that they be on a local plan. We originally asked for projects that would be able to be implemented in 3 years. At the time, you remember this is in the 2005 time period. It wasn't very much longer after that, about a year or two later, when we encountered the Great Recession, if you will, and some of our cities really struggled to be able to move forward with their projects at that time. But that was the intent originally. We asked for a 50% local match, and we said that we could fund either design, right-of-way acquisition, or construction, or all, but we could allocate funds to all of those phases. And what we did at that time is we established a project evaluation committee whereby each court member submitted or appointed 3 individuals to that committee. So there was a committee of 15, and that committee was they were charged with developing that list. Basically, they were prioritizing the projects that were submitted to us using a number of different criteria. And then that list was brought back to the Commissioners Court for approval, and that's what we've been working from. So what should the next transportation bond program look like? And as I mentioned earlier, there are different categories that we can discuss this morning, starting with the goals of the program. Should the goals of the next transportation bond program be similar to what we have used in the 06 program? Or would the Commissioners Court want to look at other possibilities, such as we just discussed a little while ago, transit opportunities?
And Randy, I would like to ask that we consider including drainage projects that are transportation related in this next bond program.
Absolutely, and that's what we've added here as a consideration. We are seeing, with so much more development, Commissioner, we're seeing much more runoff, stormwater runoff, and it's becoming an issue in some areas of the county, particularly with regard to certain roadways. And so we've added that as a possibility. And should we consider economic development impacts? This was not something that was necessarily considered in the 2006 program, but if there are certain opportunities that development may be looking at in certain areas that may be underserved from a transportation perspective, would the Commissioners Court want to consider that in the evaluation process?
Are we looking for, that one, I'm a little concerned about that, just simply from a standpoint that when you put in economic development, then I think that brings in a whole new, we're going to bring in another whole segment of the private sector and public. And I think the last time the people were very excited about the transportation projects. I think we bring in an element of disagreement as to whether or not the economic development part ought to be in there or not. So that is of concern to me. To some extent, maybe not so much the drainage improvement projects, but I'm thinking of this as something that moves people, transportation. And I think when we start putting other things in there, that does give me a little bit of concern. I just hadn't thought of it in that term. So I really hadn't spent much time thinking about that yet, and I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time just trying to get a sense as to whether or not I feel like that's something I'd want to add in there too.
Well, it's early days.
Yeah.
Yeah, Randy, one of the things that you might think about when you talk about economic development, you may have a city that comes in and they either already have a TIF and this is a project in the TIF that we're already giving economic development aid to, or are they going to want to do this project in conjunction with a TIF or an abatement or something? So we need to think that through. I don't want to say that's double dipping, but it's just something we need to consider a little more than just saying yes.
And Commissioner, you're actually highlighting another area, another slide when I get to that.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
touch on that very issue, in fact. Any other comments on that section? Let's move to the structure of what the program would look like. Obviously, we need to consider what the amount of the next bond program would be, but when we looked at our current program, as I mentioned earlier, we looked at it from the perspective of a certain amount of those funds were allocated to on-system or TxDOT related projects. Some were allocated to transit, some for discretionary. Do we want to use that same approach with this bond program, considering the same categories? Of course, it will depend on what the Commissioner's Court wishes those categories to be, and where a certain amount of those funds are allocated to that particular category. Should the bond program identify earmarks for specific projects? I know we've done quite a bit of work on the West Tarrant Transportation Initiative, for example. There are projects that I'm sure that we would want to coordinate with the Southeast Transportation Group as well. So are there certain projects that we would, as a Commissioner Court, would want to earmark certain funds for specifically? And then, should the program set aside funds for specific purposes, such as any emergency situations that may arise or a contingency element? That is something that we did do in our current program with regard to the excess funds policy that we'll discuss in just a little bit. But our excess funds policy did leave, I believe it was $500,000 as a contingency element, which I think we're going to actually utilize. So that was a good thing that we did at that time. So those are just some of the questions that we could come up with, probably a dozen more, but those are some of the questions that we identified just for discussion today. I'd like to get your feedback on that section.
Well, I've given you, again, I'm leaning toward just transportation. That could be transit and roads. Or it could be, but I think if we've got a committee, the last time we had a committee that was focused on transportation. And so as we appointed people to that, they had one single focus and then they weren't doing that. So that, I'm still leaning toward just transportation. Should bond funds be allocated by category? I think that's what the committee's to some extent for. That's my main thing, transportation. Look at the committee, let them work with the cities that are going to be putting up some of the cash. As far as the next bond program, I would say how much. Again, I would go to, we were able to do this and we were able to guarantee no increase in taxes as a result of doing that. I would want to try to maintain that deal. And just to be sure, if it's not on here, that it is, I think the judge should get an allocation of discretionary funds this next time. And unlike my predecessor who said he wasn't interested in getting any last time, I am. So.
Very well.
So noted.
To be considered.
Yeah, I figured that's coming.
One of the things that you might want to consider whenever you, as far as allocating by category, we've been through this thing since 2006. You might want to consider leaving this program open as wide as possible. That way you don't categorize different segments of money. You can do that generally, but if you leave it open so that you can include all type of transportation activities, drainage activities, which is part of transportation, those type of things. That gives the Commissioners Court flexibility in making decisions on how the money is spent, rather than categorizing it up front. And because you can always come back and change how you want to spend the money.
Maybe that could be done with the discretionary money, but again, I think in the way it happened with the evaluation, the committee, what we were hoping the committee would do, and they did just that, was they allocated or picked enough projects to get a very wide spread throughout the county.
What we did the last time, we allocated certain percentages, one on road systems and one for transit. And then we had obviously the distribution point on discretionary as related to the court members. But then the other one was just a general set of monies. And the committee, what they did, they looked at all the projects. It was a call for projects. And they looked at projects and make sure that it had met certain of the criteria that we had laid out. It wasn't that we put it in tranches, but we had criteria that these programs needed to meet. You know, I think they had to be either thoroughfares or major arterials and things such as that.
And following up on that, GK, what we need to do as part of that process is develop a policy that would help guide this. And in the policy that we're working from right now, it does have a statement in there that the Commissioners Court may allocate the funds in way. So there's some flexibility in that policy. So we would want to look at that as well.
Yeah, I don't believe that right now I would be in favor of allocating the funds in categories. That's too restrictive. If we want to show favor towards a particular area, we might do that by adding evaluation points for that particular thing, whatever it is. But I don't think we ought to cut the money up into structured categories.
Maybe the exception would be the discretionary portion.
Oh, yeah. We got to have the discretionary funds.
Very.
I think the discretionary dollars has been a great benefit to all of us because, you have a city that, they need a traffic signal. They've got 250,000, they need another 100. And we've been able to step up and help facilitate that and get it done. I think it's also important, as we all know, for the success of this program that, that it covered obviously everywhere in the county. If you want voters in Crowley or Bedford or whatever to vote for it, you better have them a project. So.
Absolutely. Just a note on the discretionary funding, we have always treated that as purely discretionary, so up to each court member as to how those funds would wish to be used, whether the court member would require a match to that or whether they, in some cases, fund a project fully. We have left that completely to the court members, and so that may be something we perhaps want to carry through with this next program as well.
But each project has to come to this court for approval.
Yes, they do require an interlocal agreement for each project.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the program criteria. So should the following elements be included or addressed in the new bond program? Originally, we talked about in our 06 program a requirement that the projects be implemented within 3 years. Do we want to have any deadlines for the construction start and completion for the projects? Perhaps a lesson learned was, again, the recession that we encountered at that time. But I think the intent at that time was to be able to move forward with and fund projects that were pretty much ready to go. The cities had already identified them for.
In the last program, we asked for projects that were shovel ready.
Right.
Things that could be started on right away. If we had the money.
And then 2008 came along, so
That's correct.
Yep.
I think 3 years is too short. I think that the reality was it was a longer period of time. On the good side, the recession, not that there's anything good about a recession, but we saw a significant drop in construction cost. I know I had one project that was budgeted $24 million, and I think it was built for 14 or 15. So North Tarrant Parkway, and so it was. There were a lot of dollars saved during that time also, which helped us on our discretionary fund, because that's where that extra money went.
Correct.
So.
So what I'm hearing is 3 years is probably too soon, but should we have any designation in there at all, or just leave that open?
I think you need a date,
Yeah,
5
you
years,
do.
something like that, 3 to 5, 4 to 5.
We could say
Yeah.
5, perhaps a 5-year.
5 seems to be a good number. Anything without a target date, you end up with a bunch of blue sky stuff that might not ever happen.
All right.
I think when a city submits a project, they need to tell us what their anticipated start date is and where are their funds coming from. Okay?
Correct. Right.
So, are they general revenue funds, or are they doing, COs, or are they doing, bond issues or whatever?
And that's one thing, just as an aside, that we are looking at with regard to the processes and procedures is coming up with a form that each city would it would be a standard form that they would fill out. That's something we did not do in 06, but I think it's be very helpful to us now, so that it identifies everything that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that point. I'm going to reserve the rest of my comments for after you conclude your presentation, Randy. But to Commissioner Fickus's point, I think it's important to understand their funding mechanism and to make sure that we're not paying for something that the city has already paid for. You know what I mean? Like, it needs to be really clear as to where the funds are coming from, and so that there aren't any conflicts, and that it's an equitable process for all of the participating cities.
Very good. Prioritize projects with non-federal funding. One of the things that we tried to do in the 06 program, and in fact, I think, Commissioner, you had mentioned the North Tarrant Parkway. We had some projects that had federal funds allocated to them. That slows the process down through the environmental NEPA requirements for those types of projects. What we did was we had some funds allocated to another project that we were able to defederalize those projects, and then move much faster, and I'm sure save some money. Right.
And that's part of the reason we saved so much money on that one project, because we did defederalize it.
And we did that with a few other projects as well. So I put that in there just as a discussion point that we would want to, Commissioner Brooks, you had mentioned the weighting or the evaluation process. Maybe that would be something to take into consideration. There's another side to that argument that I think you need to keep in mind, and that is for the projects that are on the state system, they're going to almost always have a federal component to them. And a lot of times those are 80-20. So the state matches at 20%. So if the county has a partnership with TxDOT on any of those projects, and we're sharing half of that 20%, so that we're in for 10%, then we've just leveraged the remaining funds for significantly for that project.
And that's one of the things I was going to say. One of our goals in that first one was to get as much leverage as we could, but a minimum of 1-to-1. Because that's when we were saying to the cities, we will match 1-to-1, but you got to, so that way we knew that if we authorized, in that case, $200 million, then we were going to be spending $400 million. But with the state and federal projects, sometimes we would get leverages of 4, 5, 6-to-1, and early on, we were seeing that our dollars were achieving at least a 3 and sometimes 4-to-1 match. And I think that's something that we want to continue to do to encourage the city. So, I mean, the next one down here, one of the things you've got is reduce minimum local match. Well, I wouldn't ever want to, I hope that we will not decide to agree to go lower than a 1-to-1, because then we lose some of our leverage. Thank you.
I agree. Yep, and Randy, another thing that, because of COVID, things kind of got changed, but we're going to meet with the RTC, with Michael Morris, and discuss maybe some projects that would be very important to our side of the region, the Tarrant County side, that you know, where if some additional funds could be brought, may move those projects up from, you know, where they currently are. Maybe they're out there at, you know, at 10 years plus, and we can move them up to something a whole lot sooner if we're able to bring some additional funds to the table. So, you know, then we, you know, bring in some extra dollars.
Sure.
That are federal dollars. So,
and while the picture is not real clear just yet, I worry that there's going to be an impact on the UTP, Unified Transportation Program, because of the gas tax revenues. And I think it's possible that may have an impact, and so that discussion would be very important to have probably earlier or as soon as we can. We mentioned with regard to the prioritization of the non-federal, what we might have to look at are certain instances where there may be some intersection improvements that might happen to be on an on system. At what point does it become burdensome for that particular project to have to go through that process?
I think that's a good idea from that standpoint. I agree with what Gary has said on that. We did a lot of swapping around with Michael, and were able to accomplish a lot of stuff that was very beneficial. So I'm not ruling out, but I'm just saying that for the most part, we should never be interested in something, or very rarely, I'm saying, I don't ever want to use the word never, but very rarely should we be looking at something that doesn't have at least a 1-to-1 match.
So we'll keep that at a 50% match moving forward. Okay. I mentioned here multi-phase construction projects. What we found here in our program is there are some cases where a project was submitted to us in multiple phases, and while the court approved the interlocal agreement for the entire project, all phases, so those funds are encumbered for the entire project, but it just takes such a long time to get through those phases. And then, of course, there's always the risk that at some point down the line, the city says, okay, well, we were able to get the first 2 phases done, but we can't get the third one done. We thought we had the money, but because we're 5 or 6 or 7 years down the line, we just don't have the money for that last phase. Is it better to have the city submit those projects to us by phase, and they're evaluated individually, or do we continue to have the city submit the entire corridor? And I'll tell you, just to give you the other side of that argument, the other side of that is you may get a phase or a segment that is approved, and then you may get another segment that's approved. The segment in the middle, for whatever reason, did not rise to the top, and now you've got a connectivity issue. So,
well, if I'm not mistaken, one project comes to mind that we did approve in phases in the 06 bond program, and that was East Rosedale Street from like 287 to Loop 820. That project was funded in phases, and we have finally completed the entire project, and it worked well for all of the funders involved. and has worked well for that segment of the community.
You know, I think I don't know. I guess I kind of like the idea of we'll adopt it as you come to that phase and are ready to go forward. And as long as they plan it in that deal and set it up as a priority, then one phase might take priority with evaluators. I think of North Tarrant Parkway. Commissioner Hampton started North Tarrant Parkway before I came on board. I continued it. He finished it, if it's finished.
It's not.
And so because I'm not going to go there.
Still got some more stuff.
But that's a situation where a lot of our roads will continue to become, especially the thoroughfares, they're going to continue to get larger, or we may need more and more as we go forward. But I hate to say, well, you got to go for the whole 6 lanes right now when 4 lanes may be okay for a phase at this point in time.
And so that's true. There's the element of the phasing and then the segments of the corridor itself. So what we could do, I know, for instance, in one of the cities, we encouraged them to submit the project to us in phases, which they did, and they were able to get one of their phases, maybe 2, completed. The other one, another city submitted the entire corridor, and we're still working to get that project completed, and it's been several years. So just something to consider. We talked about the match requirement for discretionary projects. We've not had any comments on that. The restrict eligibility for projects that are funded with other county funds, and this is something that we talked a little bit about earlier.
I've got a comment on match requirement for discretionary projects. I think discretionary projects ought to be discretionary. Period.
Certainly.
Yeah, our discretionary, the way we run that program today, there's not a cash match requirement or percentage match requirement. It's up to the will of the individual board member and then upon approval of the attorney.
But then those projects, it would be under the discretion. I don't disagree with that. But what I would just say is it won't be something, you couldn't put a project up into the evaluating team that says we're going to do this 100%.
No. This would be in the discretionary.
This would be in the discretionary, which would be
I
separate
don't disagree
from that.
And so, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the discretionary funds now, they do not go through a committee.
Correct.
The evaluation, the projects committee, the discretionary funds are absolutely discretionary and like I said,
to the commissioner or to the judge.
Correct.
And approval of the board.
They will require an interlocal
That's
agreement.
2 votes.
One vote.
That's 2 votes.
It's 2 votes?
Yeah, me and
You
him.
said or to the judge because you got discretionary
Got 2
funds
votes.
now.
And then finally, the eligibility for projects that are funded with other county funds. So we talked about this just a moment ago, Commissioner, with regard to TIF districts. And that was really where I was headed with this point, was if we have a TIF district that the county is already participating in, that includes infrastructure, but there is a roadway that's submitted to us for funding, should that be considered, or should the county not allocate funds to that project? Or in another instance, if we're purchasing right-of-way for whatever the reason would be in a separate pot of funds, should that be considered?
I guess from one standpoint, I hear discretionary is discretionary. And as commissioners or judge, we can recommend anything we want, and then the court will make a decision on that. But if it is something that you're taking to the evaluation committee, then I'm a little bit more reluctant to say we're going to help someone build a road in a TIF when we're already helping them, we're already helping the other side build the road and the TIF through the taxes that we're putting into that.
I think something has to be added to that, though. It really depends on that project. Is that a missing piece to create a real connector? An example would be, a North Tarrant Parkway. We have a gap on the western end of North Tarrant Parkway right there, I think around 287 in that area. And, something needs to be done to fix it, and that's an area open for development. That would be a major improvement for mobility, and I wouldn't want to eliminate the possibility of doing something for it if it creates better connectivity and mobility. So I think you just got to kind of look at the big picture. If it's just a road that's going to go into a project and that's it, and it only benefits that particular user, then probably wouldn't be so favorable on that versus the one that creates that connectivity that benefits a larger group of people, drivers.
And one thing we have done is given consideration to connectivity as well. So that may be something that we could ask the project evaluation committee to consider. Are those special instances?
I'm not against it. Let me just say that. I just think we need to flush it out a little bit.
We need to be real judicious about it.
Well, I think one way that we've done TIFs before, whenever we have projects that are in a TIF that the county doesn't participate in, I think about police departments, police stations, fire departments, fire stations, those type of things, where the municipality funds those, but the county funds are not utilized, and something like that. Parks is another thing. We can either structure the TIFs, or we can, in our policy that Randy and his group are going to be developing, can put some language in there for you all to look at to see. That way you'll be able to participate in, through our bond package, if there's a substantial road that needs to go through, but not to the point that it covers the entire match of the TIF itself. So there's a couple of different ways about going about doing this.
I'd like to see some sort of a but-for requirement if we're going to do something in a TIF district. But for our funds, it ain't going to happen.
I know when you talk about a project that maybe we're not involved with, but we had an opportunity to be involved with, but I think Deloitte would be one that we looked at, and I think, Lisa, didn't they back off to be part of our TIF? Deloitte, they did not join. Fort Worth gave them tax incentives. No, Westlake gave them incentives, but we didn't. Deloitte.
There wasn't a TIF up there.
Huh? Who are you
There's
asking?
no TIF in that area.
There's not. No, I know, but we had the opportunity, but we wanted all their employees, if I recall, to have insurance. And because they had all those hotel employees, and they backed off from being part of our TIF because of the insurance issue, I heard.
Was it a TIF or an abatement?
Well, I
We
don't.
did a tax abatement.
Tax abatement.
Instead.
But we ended up doing a road for them too. So,
Separate.
yeah, separate.
Like I said, there's a bunch of different ways about going about this, and let us try to craft something in the policy itself for you all to look at. And if you want to modify that, well, then we can do that also. I think we're hearing some of the direction the court wants on this.
Sure. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the project evaluation and selection process. The court, again, in 06, appointed members to a project evaluation committee. Does the court wish to follow that same process. I would recommend that we would want to follow that same process. And with regard to the project evaluation criteria, we listed some items here. You know, we looked at congestion mitigation. We looked at, obviously, the community support. One thing we might consider perhaps would be if the city has received any previous county funding, is that an issue that the Commissioners Court would be concerned with? Ready for implementation, we talked about the time period of 5 years included on a local plan. These are the things that were, for the most part, many of these were part of our 06 program. I mentioned economic benefits. I know we talked a little bit about that, but probably need to be real careful with how that's applied. Are there other criteria that the court would be interested in considering? Safety, obviously, is one that was a big point in our 06 program. There are several projects that were safety related specifically, and we thought that was a very good addition.
Does anybody have a desire to have more than 3 members each? I mean, I got 14 cities, and I can conceivably think of 10 of them that would want to have somebody represent them.
You get more than 15 people on a committee, you got something that's pretty hard to deal with.
Be like Congress trying to decide something. I think 3 per member is adequate.
That seemed to work
I'm not
really
sure
well.
yet.
Say again, Commissioner?
I said I'm not sure yet.
Okay. Right now, I would say I'd lean toward 3 as, yeah, I kind of agree with you. You get too many more than 15, it's going to be a circus.
What's new?
I'm getting tired of the circus.
So again, it's not listed here, but safety is one element that I would recommend for some of the criteria that we would use. But I'd like your feedback on the criteria portion. Is there anything that you can think of that we should not consider or that we should that's not listed?
No, I think in general, the 06 program worked very well, both for us and for the cities.
They loved it.
I'm kind of a mind that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's look at trying to make it better, but not more restrictive, and
Very well.
let's kind of look at trying to do at least 200 mil without, and make sure that's a number that we can defease without raising the tax rate. That is the number one criterion for this program as far as I'm concerned. We be able to pay for the bonds within the existing tax structure.
And I think that also calls into play the length of time that we're saying a project should be away from being shovel-ready. Because if we try to basically say we're going to spend $400 million if we say it has to be ready by 5 years, then it'd be complete probably by 8. That puts a lot more burden on. I mean, right now how much money do we have left in the 2006 program?
We have encumbered most of the funds. Let me see if I can find that. We have. We've encumbered most of the funds. For a lot of the funds that are remaining are in the discretionary piece of the program, and that is a total of $12 million remaining in the discretionary total.
So for basically over a 14-year basis, we've spent very close to 200 million, 190,
It's encumbered. We've actually expended 158 million.
Okay.
But that doesn't show the other projects that are encumbered, so.
So if we were looking at that, I mean, I think you had mentioned a number of 400 million. Is 400 million, we need to have somebody look at what that number might be.
I agree with the 400. We'll look at it and see if it works. If it's not, then we back off.
What was the interest rate on the 200?
We sold those in tranches. You might remember that our goal was to phase in the whole project over a 10-year period. And we did that so that we could not raise that tax rate and still have enough money available. And of course, 2008 happened, and we all know what happened in 2008. But I think that in those areas, we were still around 3%. If you combine them all together.
Where are we today?
We can probably reach out and do 1.75 to 2. You know, we're a true AAA.
So probably close to half.
I'm sorry?
Close to half
Yeah.
of what we were?
Yeah, probably so, in that
So
area.
we might be doing 3. Well, let's just check with Hilltop.
Sure. We'll
Get an idea
we'll
from
talk
them.
with the FAs on this. One thing the reason that we did this in a 10-year cycle is because we didn't want to have too much money in our treasury that was bond money, because we're paying interest on it. Also, you know, you've got the various regulations dealing with holding on to bond money too long.
Yep.
And so it was a strategy that we developed at the staff level and the board approved, and it worked out really pretty well.
By the same token, money is not likely to get much cheaper than it is right now.
Right. That's why it's.
Well, so I would say if we could do 300 or 400 million, I'd love to do that.
Well, yeah, we'll need to, you know, that's going to be another discussion on top of this discussion here. And sure, we'll get the FA. The FAs need to come in and talk to us about that. They're the experts on this.
So with regard to the evaluation criteria, I think what I've heard so far is that we'd want to use essentially the same criteria that we've used in 06. So that's what the project evaluation committee would be charged with.
Right.
And then the last question is, does court have an interest in limiting the number of project submittals by each agency? This is just a question for consideration. I know in the 06 program, we've had some cities that had quite a number of projects and others that maybe only had 1 or 2. It was just in the original call for projects, that's essentially just how they came in, and then they, again, were prioritized and we applied our funding, and that was the fallout from
Well,
that.
the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the city of Fort Worth. That, you know, they've got bond issues that have been passed that they haven't done projects on. And personally, if they can take some of our money and put it with some of their bond money and go do a project and then take some money they didn't use on a project because we were able to give them some money, and they can take that money and put it on another project, and maybe we partner on that project, we're speeding up their whole process of getting their projects done. And that'll work for a number of cities, but Fort Worth, because they're so big, you know, they're certainly going to have more projects than Bedford or Grapevine or somebody like that.
Did we limit last time?
We did not.
And I don't-
And the overwhelming majority of the projects that we funded were in R, not Fort Worth.
We're where?
Arlington. Arlington.
Yeah, because we did parking lot.
That was discretionary.
Arlington had 17
Discretionary.
projects.
They had 17. Well,
Yeah,
I guess,
we did those 3. Didn't we do those 3 bridge projects or part of them?
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think but that was at a time when we were doing a lot of work on the 3 bridges as well as that Interstate 30 right in there.
Right.
You know, I think what we did last time, correct me if I'm wrong, is we said submit however many projects you want to do, and we said to the committee, be mindful that this is a county-wide bond issue, and if it's not looked at as a county-wide, then it may not pass.
Yeah.
It's not going to work if the money is not spread across the county.
And so I think that we just let them submit whatever they want to submit, and then hopefully the committee, and what the committee does is they give us recommendations. And we can always change those recommendations, although last time I think we went with just what they said.
With the recommendations, and it worked.
And we may very well do that. But I do want to make sure that however we write or however the wording goes, that if a transit project is chosen, I want to be able to do it. And last time after the fact, we were told that the way the wording of the bond project did not allow us to do anything other than transportation work. And so we started this whole thing along the Tex rail that we could only do intersections. We couldn't give them the money and say, go forth and get this project done.
And TexRail was exactly what we had in mind when we set that money aside.
Exactly. And what ended up happening is that we still ended up doing good work because that was the federal. That was where we were able to take it away from something that we were going to have to comply with a bunch of federal red tape. And we moved that money over, and then the RTC gave us money, gave the T the money that they would have otherwise spent on the Lamar.
Correct.
Under
It was to swap those.
So it was a good swap. It worked out very well, but
Sure.
Well, we learned some lessons in all of that, and we'll need to get with the district attorney's office on this, because one of the issues that was raised the last time is there was some unclarity as far as could the county as a county spend money on transit. We could spend it on roadways and safety improvement issues, but I think the statute's changed on that also, which goes back to, which will free up what Judge Woodley is talking about. So we'll need to get with them and make it as flexible as possible so that, like I said, we need to make sure you have the greatest flexibility that you can have on this.
Yeah, GK, and to that point, because one of the reasons why I reserve my comments to the end is because I don't have the benefit of time and lived experience of what happened in 2006, and then through that time, obviously, I was not on the court, and I was interested to hear what my colleagues had to share about how things worked. And it sounds like, obviously, that the program was successful, but I have always been concerned with the fact that we don't have a countywide integrated transportation system. And not that there aren't options, but if you're in far southeast Tarrant County, how do you get to far northwest Tarrant County on some type of transportation option aside from the road? And so I'll need to make sure that I understand, and to your point, GK, is the goal of the program based off of what we're allowed to do by law. That would, understanding that, also getting a better, more background on the 2006 program, and then revisiting what's been done in Precinct 2 through that program, talking with some stakeholders, and I can provide some additional input on some of these decision points that have already been made, but some of them that are still left open. And I want for those decision points to be made really clear for me so that I can give the specific feedback that you all are looking for.
Commissioner, you raise a good point, and I think that, for example, the transit, while we're moving through this piece of the program itself, we need to really get with the DA's office, because if we can identify some shortfalls, then we have a legislative session coming up, and maybe we can get down to Austin and have those shortfalls uplifted so that we can do those particular activities.
So where do you see us headed from this point, and when will you be ready to notify the cities?
I actually have a schedule that is part of this presentation. I just have one more slide, unless you would like to.
Good.
Just with regard to the implementation and administration of the program, you recall the excess funds policy. This basically states that any realized savings from those projects are put back into the commissioner's discretionary accounts. I'm sorry,
and judge.
Court members' discretionary
The
accounts.
individual commissioner?
Equally. So the way that's worded is that it would be applied equally to each court member's fund. Scope change policy. What we've done in the past in the 06 program is that any time that there is a change to the scope of a project, we bring that back for the court's consideration. Sometimes knowing what defines a scope change, it may be a little, maybe something we need to talk about. But does the court wish to continue with that same process, or is that something that would maybe need to be handled in a different manner? That's
just bearing in mind that once the funds have been allocated, the only scope change we can accommodate generally is a downsizing of the project, not an upsizing of the project, because we will not have the funds to accommodate an increased scope, usually, unless it goes into somebody's discretionary fund.
And I say the only exception, I mean, in this, this will get me in trouble, but it won't be the first time. If our project is 6 lanes, 3 in either direction, and all of a sudden, right as they're starting the project already, they decide, well, no, we're going to take 2 of those lanes and make them back lanes. I would like for that to come back, because I'm not convinced that I'm wanting to spend a whole lot of money reducing traffic on the thoroughfare for a bike lane. And now the bikers will be out here tomorrow. Well, they won't be out here tomorrow. They'll be out here next Tuesday surrounding the building.
Well, since you mentioned that, Judge, that was one of the questions I had as well, is whether the court would wish to consider those types of projects. I know trail projects were submitted to us in the 06 program, but we said that we did not want to apply the funds for those purposes. I know some cities are interested in those downsizing, if you will, some of their arterials. And so we would need to know, or the project evaluation committee would need to know whether or not those should be considered or evaluated.
Are you familiar with what a complete street is?
Yes.
Don't bring that up.
I'm sorry.
Don't bring that up.
I mean, we say thoroughfares, and I'm thinking must exist on a local thoroughfare plan. Now, I want to move people. That's just me. There may be 3 others that just say we want to make it a beautiful. I want to move people through. And so the money that I would like to see us matching will be, and maybe somebody will bring a project in and the committee will approve it, and I'll be all for it. But I just can't think of too many right now. And just to keep the trend going, it's kind of like right now when I travel south on Forest Park and I go past Rosedale, and all of a sudden what used to be a 2-lane road becomes a 1-lane road because we got a bike path in there. I didn't want to put it on a diet, I wanted to supersize it. So that's just me.
That didn't happen on Rosedale, incidentally, but unfortunate choice of an example.
What, Forest Park or Rosedale?
Well, we'll continue to bring the scope changes back to the Commissioner's Court.
I want to see the scope changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those would be after approval.
Well,
after it's been approved by the evaluation committee and we've approved the list by the court, then scope changes occur.
And I agree, and I think what happens is if we've said, okay, we're going forward with this, and then all of a sudden the project begins and the city changes their minds on what, that's when we need to have something in the document that says, before, if you're going to use our money, you define how you're going to use it, and we'll go along with it. But if that changes, we reserve the right to pull our money back.
Absolutely.
I don't have a problem.
These are going to be ILAs, and in each of the ILAs, there'll be a scope, and it'll be a definitive scope. And any change to the ILA is going to have to go back to the Commissioner's Court.
One of the things that we've done in our 06 bond program is we've told the cities we don't necessarily fund certain enhancements such as landscape lighting, park benches, trees, that sort of thing. Our focus has been mostly on the cost of the road improvement itself. So do you wish for us to continue with that same approach, or do we just simply say we will fund half of whatever the total cost of that project would be? In some cases, some projects may have a bike path, they may have sidewalks, that sort of thing. We have funded, if it's sod for, we consider that part of the project. Sidewalks in some cases, if it's part of the project itself, but it's those enhancements that we've said we wouldn't.
Didn't we fund walking trails and bike trails on 26?
If they were,
Through Colleyville?
it was part of the improvement to 26 itself. So if it was part of the actual road project, yes.
A lot of federal money.
But they weren't. But if it's a separate bike trail or a separate, we didn't. But certain those types of enhancements, we always encourage the city that we would tell them that we would fund. Our portion would go towards the road improvements. And I guess one way you could look at it is the city's 50% would go towards those other expenditures. So we would continue to use that same approach.
I'm not opposed to looking at some of that, but I'm focused more on the road itself. And no, if we're saying, I guess what I would say is if we've said we're going to build half the road and you're going to build half the road, then you're going to build half the road. And if you decide you're going to put a lot of improvements over there, now the one exception, what did we do on 1709 north of, not 1709, 1938?
1938.
North of 1709, because I know Westlake wanted to.
Yeah, Westlake did a lot of things that they paid for in that project.
And we just built a road.
They put in duct banks for utilities and tunnels on the road, and they maintained that project too in Westlake.
And for clarification, our funds on that project were in the design phase of that.
Right.
So. And then finally, we have interlocal agreement renewals. I understand the reason. I'm sure this is a conversation with the auditor's office, but I think because of the way that we sold our bonds, we had to bring renewals back to the Commissioner's Court each year for a lot of our bond projects that were still ongoing. I'm not sure if there's another alternative to that, or if that's something we'll need to do here. We can certainly do that, but it's an annual event where you'll be seeing those renewals, and they may be quite lengthy in some cases. So
you skipped over consultant assistance.
Oh, I sure did. I'm sorry about that. Yes, and so in the 2006 bond program, we had a consultant assist us with the implementation of the program. And so when we had those project evaluation committees, they were instrumental in being able to bring to the committee not just the project list, but we actually had some work done which would included modeling and assessing those projects individually. So they would be able to see, for instance, any changes in level of service for those projects based on what the city was wanting to do. And so that helped in the scoring process. That kind of gets into the cost effectiveness of the project. And so I'd certainly recommend that we would want to continue that same direction. It's possible too that we may need the consultant to assist us in some of the management of the program to get us started and kind of get us on the right path. But we have funds in our.
How much did we pay for the consultants on the first project?
That contract was, I believe it was right around $250,000.
So we went out on an RFP for that.
I cannot recall how we did that.
I know that, we ended up using Freese and Nichols, didn't we?
We did.
And didn't they have projects? They were already doing the master plan at that time, I think, for Parker County. and maybe some of the areas out on the west side of Tarrant County?
They began that process, I think it was not long after our bond program was approved. And so I remember that, yes. It was right around that same time.
I think we did an RFP on that. It's a consulting services contract. We don't really need to do that, but I think we did that to see what type of vendors we were.
Let's go back and look at that too, and then I would be interested in knowing, because, I mean, there's still a lot of development going on. Granted, we've got the whole county where we need to do the work, but there's still a lot of stuff going on now, especially on the west side with Walsh Ranch, with all of that west side all the way up to Wise County and that area, and then a lot of development going on in Parker County. And so I think that we need to also coordinate with Parker County and have some conversations with them. I'd love for them to do a bond project at the same time, and we really look at doing some master planning from Weatherford to Fort Worth, from Decatur to maybe Cleburne.
We can reach out to them and find out what the status is. I know their program was around at that same time that ours was. It wasn't long after, so I don't know what their thoughts are, but we can reach out to them.
I'm still pushing for that freeway from Decatur 730 all the way down to I-30 or I-20.
That'll lead into the next steps, which will tie into what you're mentioning, Judge.
Now, we don't have that in this.
No, you should have the last two pages. If you don't, well, then we'll need to get those.
Is that supposed to be one of our pages?
Yes. You have those in your red folder? If not, we'll make them available to you.
Yep, yes, that one didn't have it, okay. It's here.
You have it in your red folder?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this schedule is just a draft schedule that we can talk about and modify if we need to. But the thought here was, we tried to structure this schedule for a November 2021 bond election, but we'll have some comments on that as we move forward. But assuming that we are looking at a November 2021 election, we believe that we could get the program policy ready for Commissioners Court action either in the December or January timeframe, based on some of the comments that we're hearing today. And then it likely will take us some time to get to the approval of the consultant contract. I put in here March. It may be April, but we're looking at that time frame for getting the consultant on board. And what I'm showing here is January to June of next year for the time when we would officially notify the cities of our program. This is after the program policy has been approved. We would then send out notices to the cities and formally request that they provide us with their projects. And then in that time frame, not necessarily in January, but in that time frame, we could establish the project evaluation committee so that they're ready when they're called. I'm showing here in the April to June time frame that we would really begin our coordination, our heavy discussions, if you will, with TxDOT and COG. And the reason why I put it out to April is because it would be nice if we could have those conversations with our consultant assisting us, and so that that would be beneficial to us, I believe. And then the June to October time frame is the time when the project evaluation committee would prioritize and evaluate these projects and establish a list that could be presented to the court. Now, if we're looking at a November election, you see that's a very tight time frame there. So I offer that as a possibility, although I will say we can't, if we follow the schedule, we can't miss a beat. We have to.
Well, I will tell you that I think the prioritization schedule has to come to the court before October the 1st, or no later than October the 1st.
I think so too.
When do we have to set the election? Isn't that in August? Or
I think it's at least 90 days, but we'll need, one of the things that, we talk about consultants and everything, we need to start having our discussions with bond counsel, because they'll set those dates. So it's going to have to be something that goes to the AG's office for approval, things like that. So we'll need to bring them in also. We'll bring them in very soon, because we just need to know what the timelines are.
Okay.
And that's the reason why, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, I was just going to say, if we're talking about working with a tight timeline, when can I expect the information that I asked for, and then a goal date for a meeting, so that you all can have the feedback from me?
I mean, I'm sorry, what information have you
The question wasn't
requested?
to you, Judge. The question was to Randy.
I'm sorry.
So, yeah, Randy, based off of the things that I said that I would need to review and to be able to provide some feedback on the decision points, when would you like to meet with me?
We'll look at our schedule, and I'll get with your office, but we can do that as whenever there's availability. We can go over our current bond program that we've been doing and answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Let's aim for early November, so we can just get it done, unless, I don't know if there's a timeline to bring anything back to court sooner than this December 2020 time, but just trying to make sure that that there's sufficient time for me to review and provide feedback. That's my goal.
We'll look at early November if that's all right.
Okay.
Our whole goal on today was to lay this out in front of you, get some of your feedback, and we need to take this back and work on it. Commissioner Allen, we want to make sure that we address all the issues that you have asked. I don't think that's going to take much research on our part. We just need to schedule a meeting with you. We can do that early November. But I would assume that we would bring this back for discussion sometime in mid-November.
I would hope so. I would hope that by our meeting, we usually have 1 or 2 meetings in December.
Actually, 3.
Well, we have the little one at the end, which is nothing.
And we may want to bring this back in a work session rather than
And that would be good. I just would like for us to, hopefully, if we're going to approve the program to go forward, I would like for us to do it in early December, before we go on our Christmas break. And then I'd like to see us have the approval of the consultant's contract somewhere. I mean, I'd bring everything back at least 1 month. So to make that a February deal. And I truly believe that we've got to have, if we're going to do this, we've got to have the prioritized list of projects by no later than October 1st, and I'd really love to have it by September 1st.
I think it's important that if we're going to do this, that the election be in November of 2021, so that it does not bump up against one of our elections for Commissioners Court and thereby become an issue in those campaigns. If we're going to do this, then next year is the time to do it.
Very good.
Okay.
That's all I've got.
Any other comments or questions at this time? Randy, thank you for this work.
Absolutely.
We're going to take about a 5-minute recess at this time. Mr. Manius, take it away.
Thank you, Honor. Now we're going to start the other briefing item, which is the public health update. Mr. Tenasia, are you available?
Your Honor and members of the court, we'll go over our emerging health issues COVID-19 update. As you can see, the numbers continue to grow. 40 million plus cases worldwide, 1.12 million deaths. U.S. is back having a surge again. At the low, I think we were close to maybe 30,000 cases a day. And recently we were hitting, again, average of about 60,000 cases a day. I'll show you a chart, but we're definitely in an upswing across the country. Wisconsin seems to be a hot spot. They've had a lot of issues, hospitals nearing capacity. So 8.2 million cases, 220,000 deaths. Texas is starting to make a turn to a upswing. 828,000 cases, 17,000 deaths, and 7.5 million viral tests conducted. Tarrant County cases were definitely in an uptrend for the last several weeks. 60,000 cases, 709 deaths, and 49,000 recoveries. And the data on the right shows that we finally crossed 500,000 tests conducted in Tarrant County. So I have a couple of updates. We launched a pilot program for at-home testing. It ran for about 3 weeks. We mailed out about 280 test kits. And we started to get a little concerned when we weren't getting lab results back on those test kits because they're tracked. We found that our return to the lab rate was about 5 to 6%. So we called and followed up with these folks. And on the next slide, I'll share with you some reasons why people weren't doing it. But as a result, there was some escalation. People did use the kit and send it in. Overall, utilization rate is about 22%, which is not what we wanted to see. We wanted it 90% or 95%, somewhere in that range. And so our recommendation right now is to pause this for evaluation, look at other options. Just to preview, one of the things we've been toying with is when we have known contacts, sometimes they turn symptomatic and they need to go for testing. And if you recall, that was one of the reasons we partnered with MedStar in the beginning. This might be a way to get them a kit at their house so that when they're getting sick, they don't need to go somewhere. So we'll just kind of evaluate and see if that's a better way to utilize this. But for now, we're going to take a pause on this at-home testing. It did not go as the way as we had hoped it. It's very convenient, but the utilization rate was quite a bit lower. And then next slide, here's a brief survey. Again, this is just a quick phone call follow-up, nothing fancy. But a common reason was emerging. People were keeping them for later use, which I understand from a public viewpoint, that makes sense. But from our standpoint, I mean, these are kits that are in short supply. Obviously, we're still trying to ramp up testing capacity. So we'd rather use them in our drive-through locations where we know that they're going to get used. And some we noticed that they would order a kit, but then also the person would show up at a drive-through. So that was another reason they kind of got a little, okay, I'm sick, I need to go somewhere, and I don't want to wait, even though they ordered it online. So we had some of that where people sort of showed up in the drive-through setting.
Vinny,
yes, sir.
What was the length of your turnaround time from mailing out the kit to it being used immediately to returning the results to the person? How long did that typically take?
So I don't have that broken down the way you asked, but the typical turnaround time is about 48 hours or less from when a kit is arriving at the lab, and it's overnight shipping. They turn it around within 48 hours. So it's
tested within 48 hours and mailed back.
And I can tell you the results come to the person faster than what they're coming to us. There's about a 8 to 12 hour delay on our end, but they're getting it faster. And we try to do this every day. Of course, Sunday, sometimes you can drop off the kits, but they don't get mailed out the following day. But we try to do it like the same day of the cutoff. And, it's a next day delivery because they're going locally. So it wasn't that it was a big delay, but again, you don't know this till you try it out and kind of figure out what's working.
Sure.
Some people had trouble.
Applaud you for trying it.
Yes, sir. And some people had trouble activating the kits because there is a process. You have to go online to the Vault website, create an account, scan the barcode of the kit. So at home, sometimes people get a little confused. Now, Vault has an option. You can have a provider call on Zoom, and they walk you through the activation process, make sure you've collected the sample correctly. But it's a little bit involved, and some people don't feel, tech savvy enough to be trying to do that. Easier to just go through a drive-through and have them walk you through it. And some complaints were there about they did not receive the kit even though they ordered it, and they had to go hunt it down from an apartment office or things like that. So again, just some logistical issues. But overall, we're going to pause that for a little bit, evaluate if there's a better way to do this, and then we'll come back and let you know.
Vinny, before you move on from this slide, I had a question. You had mentioned that there's this bullet that they went to test via another method. not another county method, right? So they weren't able to were they able to make an appointment, or qualify for an at-home test kit, which they received, but then they were also able to qualify for a test via some other method, or you're saying outside of what the county's providing?
Actually,
Does that make sense?
both ways. Some showed up at our drive-through. Some decided to just go to like a CVS or another local location where they just felt convenient. It happens when you're sick. You go online, you think, I'll just order it, and then you change your mind. Well, I'm getting sicker, so let me just get up in the car and go somewhere and get tested. So it's just, it's reality. So that's where, and it happened both ways. They came to our drive-thrus, they went through other locations. It's kind of all over.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and again, like I was mentioning, U.S. is definitely seeing an upsurge. As you can see, a clear uptrend has emerged. And I know the bars are a little faded on the back, but as you can see, there are some days that are spiking pretty high. And those were the days that I mentioned. We're getting 60,000 on average. And I think at the peak we had in July, maybe 70 or 77, I think was the peak day. So we're getting close to a peak-like situation, what we saw back in July. Texas definitely seeing an uptrend. It's slower than what we are experiencing, but it's turning. We're a large state. So here's the situation a little bit more detailed. As you can see, the uptrend line, the 7-day moving average has definitely changed direction, and the bars are getting bigger on the top chart. The fatalities on the bottom are certainly trending lower, but usually they coincide, they follow after you have a case surge, and you're going to have fatalities sort of follow later. Positivity rate is confirming what we're seeing. Last week, I think when I presented, there was 6.2 something, and now we're at 8.1. So definitely a change in trend there. There's a minor dip at the end, but we'll see if that comes back down or it continues to trend up. But so far, certainly a trend change in observation there. This is Tarrant County data. Hospital trends certainly showing that we're accelerating. We're looking pretty similar to what we saw going into 4th of July. Certainly an acceleration. Overall, 9% occupancy rate compared to total hospital capacity. This is with COVID-19 confirmed patients. Case trend, certainly acceleration. If you look at the last bar, which, it takes time to fill in because more reports come in later, but the bar before that, we had probably like 3,400 or so cases. Our 7-day moving average, which is a dotted line, is at 3,100 cases. Clear uptrend for the last 6 weeks. Positivity rate is at about 12%. Some days are heavier, some are lighter, so the 7-day moving average is certainly trending up.
Now that's the rate.
Yes, sir.
The 12% is hospitals, patients against patients in the hospital versus COVID patients against total bed capacity.
So let me back up. Sorry, went the other way. So this chart right here is the bed occupancy chart. The blue line is what you're, asking for. The 9%, that's total COVID positive patients compared to total bed capacity in Tarrant County. So that's the chart there. And then the one that I'm talking about is the positivity rate. It's how many people we tested and how many came back positive. And I think I mentioned it a few times.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So it's not 100% of the data, but it gives you a good enough estimation of what's going on in the community because we have a lot of that data now coming in.
It just was close to that other number.
Yeah, they're pretty. Yes, sir. They're pretty close. And then COVID-like illness trends. So this is when people seek health care within an ER setting with flu-like symptoms, but flu is ruled out. That's sort of the general definition for COVID-like illness. And that's been trending for the last several weeks. And as you can see, recent couple of weeks have been accelerating. On the right-hand side, the bottom chart, the blue line, is the actual flu-like or influenza-like illness. And if you recall, every year we do flu briefings where I show that ILI as a good indicator of what's happening. As you can see, it's starting to pick up a little, but it's not rising as rapidly as what we're seeing with COVID. So certainly, flu's getting ruled out still, and COVID is there. So there's a dichotomy. I mean, you can see the separation happening. COVID is accelerating, flu is getting up, but not quite to the point where we're worried about it at this point. So how do we continue to bend the curve in Tarrant County? We need to take our flu shot because we need to take flu out of the equation. So that's very important this year. And then we continue to wear masks everywhere. It's not going to only help with COVID, but it may possibly help with keeping flu at a lower rate. As we're accelerating in Tarrant County, our personal actions become very, very important. We need to stay home as much as possible and stay 6 feet away from others. I mean, those are really the only measures that we have available. There's no vaccine there yet. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of promising candidates out there, but it's not arrived. There's progress on therapeutics, but they're not available for general public use. Very different than what we see in the flu setting. We have Tamiflu and many other medications that people could just get a prescription, take it at home. They can get the vaccine. So those tools are not available. So these public health tools are very, very important, and avoiding large gatherings becomes important as well. In the end, following public health guidance is the best advice I can give you, and that's all I have. If y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I do. Vinny, a couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion about flu vaccines and some things that your team was working on. When should we expect a fuller update on that?
I can give you a quick update. I know we've had a couple of situations where we tried to order more vaccine and it kind of disappeared by the time our order hit the vendor. So there's certainly a demand. So I know our purchasing department's been working real hard. I believe there's about 1,000 or 1,500 doses that arrived today at the health department. And I know we worked with JPS as a partner. You'll see some paperwork coming regarding that. They were able to get us one order of 1,300 doses, and I think they made another order of 5,000 of the high dose ones, but we don't have a ship date on it. The estimated was end of October. They found some vendor that had 25,000 doses. Same thing happened to them. When we were asking to make an order, it disappeared. So we're struggling a little bit and trying to piecemeal, maybe 10, 15,000 doses between the two of us. And hopefully soon we'll come with some paperwork and a distribution plan on how to get that going in our community.
Commissioner,
what we've also done is we've asked JPS to go ahead and, if something comes up on the spot market on this, to go ahead and acquire it immediately. And paperwork that he's talking about is an ILA between the county and the hospital district where we would pay them back for that expense of acquiring. And then there's an administrative fee on getting the shots. And it's not just going to be with the hospital district. Remember, we talked about using the FQHCs also to make those distribution points. So you'll see paperwork as relates to that also. Right now, the key is to get the vaccine.
Yes.
understood. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We had also talked about trying to get with some of the local pharmacies. What have we done about, saying we'll buy your vaccine or we'll pay for whatever we need to do and give those free?
We're continuing to do outreach with them, Your Honor, but we don't have anything to report on that now.
When do we think we will?
As soon as we get more feedback from the pharmacies. It's not just the individual pharmacies. We have to go corporate. And so we're working through that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
So, Your Honor, members of the court, we're now going to go into the administrator's section, and we'll go through item number 1 first. I do know we do have some audience participation forms and I think several calls that we need to make also. So let me just start by laying out item number 1 under the administrator's section. This concerns any type of declarations of local disaster, anything new from the governor's office, and amended declarations of local disaster. In your court book today, you'll see the activities that we reported actually last time, and it dealt with the bars and with the opening of the bars 50% capacity, and also 75% of businesses which are operating at 50% capacity. We're now able to open up to 75%. One of the things that Vinny talked about is the number of COVID patients to the number of beds that are in the hospital. That is the mark that the governor's office had indicated, and so we'll be focusing on that particular number because it's not just in county, but it's in the hospital region. So we'll every time you see that number here, you'll need to know that may be a number for Tarrant County, but then also there's a regional number, and we may be running just a little bit higher than the regional number. So we're still in the safe zone as it relates to that. So, Your Honor, that's all we have on that one. I think it would be good now if you want to go through the audience participation.
I will say that I also talked with the regional rep over the TABC. They did go to several of the bars that were open up and some of those that are considered restaurants because of a loophole. And I was informed that there were 3 within the North Texas area that were going to be suspended for a 30-day period, 1 in Fort Worth, 2 in the Dallas area. I was told that late yesterday, and I'm not sure they've, that particular place in Tarrant County doesn't open up until Thursday, and at that point he had not had a chance to talk with the owner yet to inform him that he was losing his liquor license for 30 days, but so I don't want to mention the name until I know for sure that they've done that.
Yeah. And Your Honor, and members of the court, the fire marshal is going to, he and his deputies will be out beginning in the latter part of this week and the first part of next week. We don't have that many bars that are in the unincorporated area, about 12 to 15, but we're going to do visual inspections on capacity issues and things like that. We want to make sure that those bars and those bar owners are fully aware of what the county's position is on all of those. So that's something that Randy Renoir did. He took that on right away, and we're making sure that those that are in our jurisdiction also receive the message.
Question for the DA's office. If he went into one of those places and they were not compliant with, if they're not compliant with the occupancy, I assume that he can ask them to leave and then only allow in the number of people to get to that occupancy level. What about masks? Can he write citations since we as a county don't have ordinance making authority? He is Randy Winraw, the fire marshal.
And the fire marshal has peace officer status just like any sheriff's department people. So
our recommendation to the fire marshal would be to go ahead and enforce what he can normally enforce, occupancy, and do what he can normally do. But to the extent that there's not social distancing or not wearing masks, that he report that to the TABC so that they can come in and do the enforcement.
So that partially, that told me what you thought. I mean, I guess it told me what you're recommending to him, but does he have the authority to write a citation citing them for not wearing the mask as is ordered by the governor and the institution or the business itself, a citation to them for not following my order?
I do not believe that he can write a citation for violation of your order or the governor's order.
Okay.
Who can?
Fort Worth Police Department can write citations for violations of the Fort Worth ordinance because they have in their ordinance that it is a $250 or $500 fine, but a violation of the county order or a violation of the governor's order is not something that is punishable by citation, other than the mask component in GA 29, which does allow citations to be written for not wearing a mask if you've received a warning. There are some concerns about that particular enforcement measure.
Well, we know they can get up and walk away if they want to.
Correct.
But if they don't walk away, are you saying that the governor's order is unenforceable in the unincorporated area?
For mask wearing?
Yes.
So there's 2 governor's orders in play, GA 29 and GA 32. GA-29 allows you to write a citation for not wearing a mask if you've been warned. If an enforcement officer feels comfortable doing that, then we can presume that that is valid. GA-32, a violation of that order cannot be enforced by a citation, is our interpretation of that. Because the offense is not a Class C misdemeanor.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand why you can write one under 29, but you can't write one under 30.
Because 29 expressly says that for violations of this order, GA-29, you can issue a citation after you've given a warning for $250 to the person who is not complying with that order. So it provides the authority.
So in that situation, if Randy warns somebody and then goes back in there and they still are not wearing one, or they refuse to wear one after his warning, and he writes the citation, where do they go to respond to that citation? Is it a JP, or is it would it be the JP?
I assume that there's instructions on the citation as to how you handle that citation. But yes, I would assume it is the JP.
JP is that precinct.
Oh, hey, Randy.
Okay. That's what I needed to know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I will begin. I'm going to start with those folks who are going to be requesting a call. And so the first one will be Shannon Paul, followed by James Shelton, followed by Rebecca Rogers.
Hello, this is Shannon.
Hi, Shannon. This is Judge Whitley, and we're at the place on our agenda for audience participation, and you had indicated that you wish to address the court. So you have 3 minutes to make any comments that you would like to make.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You bet.
Okay, I would prefer to present this to you in person, but I won't. Your assertion that masks have no physical effect on people is blatantly false. I've sat through 2 court sessions with a mask on, and I'm not going to do it again due to the problems I have after wearing one for so long. I have no classified medical exemption, and I don't feel like I need a physician's permission to breathe the air that God has given us. Also, I don't want to be treated like those who have an exemption, like a criminal or a second-class citizen. Your exempt entry requirements into the court are extremely discriminatory. There's temperature checks for everyone, but those who are exempt are also subject to an ID check. They have to wear a wristband, a yellow wristband, and have an officer escort them to a secluded room. So that's a perfect segue into the point of my speech. In general, man is interdependent on other humans, and no man is truly an island or self-sufficient. We rely on others to a certain degree to function in our world. As soon as I enter into an agreement with another, I become dependent on that person or entity. The more that I become dependent on that person or entity, the more I expose myself to their impulse to tyrannize me. We, the people, have entered into an agreement with the government, and that agreement is called the Constitution. If we allow ourselves to become more and more dependent upon the government, we're exposing ourselves to their impulse to tyrannize us all. The more government we have, the more we're exploited and alienated from our basic human nature. It's extremely naive to believe that the government is going to cure any problems of mankind. So, Judge and Commissioners, it's past time for you to unmask Tarrant County. You've overstepped your constitutional limits. We're protected by our First Amendment and our Fourth Amendment rights from your overreach. It is our God-ordained right and duty to protect ourselves, not yours. Our health care decisions are not between ourselves and the medical professions we choose. They're not between us and the government. Quite frankly, they're none of anyone else's business. So it is time to end your tyranny. You are neither our saviors nor our masters. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Have a good day. Next is James Shelton.
Hello.
James.
Yes.
This is Judge Whitley. We're at the point on our agenda for audience participation, and you had indicated you wish to address the court, and so you have 3 minutes to make any comments that you'd like to make.
Thank you. What's the big deal with wearing a mask? It simply doesn't make sense for everyday people to wear a mask, especially children. Masks are for those who are ill, not healthy. Moreover, wearing one can create, not deter, illness. When individuals wear masks, they end up touching their faces more frequently, which could lead to infection. They also rebreathe particles that their lungs have exhaled that are trapped in the mask. Additionally, the masks that everyday people wear impede oxygen flow and aren't porous enough to allow carbon dioxide to fully dissipate. All of these things decrease the body's immune response. According to Dr. Eli Paransevich, an internist and infectious disease specialist, the average healthy person does not need to have a mask, and they shouldn't be wearing masks. There's no evidence that wearing masks on healthy people will protect them. They wear them incorrectly, and they can increase the risk of infection because they're touching their face more often. If I can wear a mask, why can't you wear a mask? Many people assume that because they are able to wear a mask without issue, everyone should be able to wear a mask without issue. There are numerous reasons why someone might not be able to wear a mask. These include anxiety or other psychological issues and disorders, autism or other developmental disorders, hearing impairments, fear of racial profiling, violence or brutality by being a person of color or minority in a mask, PTSD from being a victim of a rape, sexual assault, or another violent crime in which the perpetrator was wearing a face covering or forced the victim to wear a face covering, respiratory conditions such as asthma and COPD, sensory issues and disorders, and skin conditions, staph infections, yeast infections, contact dermatitis, etc. Moreover, just because someone with one of the above conditions wears a mask does not mean that everyone with that condition can do so. Every human has a different physiological and psychological makeup. What's true for one person is not true for all. And I'd also like to add that the court has once again allowed Vinny Taneja to be referred to as a doctor in open court without correction. This shows a lack of respect and transparency towards the citizens who do not know that he is not a licensed doctor in Texas. This should not be allowed in open court. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. Have a nice day. Next is Rebecca Rogers.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Rebecca. This is Judge Whitley, and we're at that point on the agenda for audience participation. You have 3 minutes to make whatever comments that you would like to make.
Okay, thank you. Since the CDC and the science they produce is who you claim to follow, they released this study that was reported on October 12th, and it has been overlooked by Vinny Taneja and the Tarrant County Commissioners. I'm going to share with you the findings today. CDC study finds over the majority of people getting coronavirus wore masks. A Center for Disease Control reports released in September shows that the mask and face coverings are not effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19, even for those people who consistently wear them. A study conducted in the United States in July found that when they compared 154 case patients who tested positive for COVID-19 to a control group of 160 participants, the healthcare facilities who were symptomatic but tested negative, over 70% of the case patients were contaminated with the virus and felt ill despite always wearing a mask. In the 14 days before illness onset, 71% of the case patients and 74% of the control patients reported always using cloth face coverings or other mask types when in public, the report stated. In addition, over 14% of the case patients said they often wore a face covering and were still infected with the virus. The study also demonstrated that under 4% of the case patients became sick with the virus, even though they never wore a mask or face covering. Despite over 70% of the case patients participants' efforts to follow the CDC recommendations by committing to always wearing face coverings at gatherings with less than 10 or greater, with greater or equal to 10 or less than 10 people in a home, shopping, dining at a restaurant, going to an office setting, salon, gym, bar, coffee shop, or church religious gatherings, or using public transportation, they still contracted the virus. While the study notes that some of these people may have contracted the virus from a few moments that they removed their mask to eat or drink at a place that offers on-site eating or drinking, the CDC concedes that there is no successful way to evaluate if that was the exact moment someone became exposed to the contracted the virus. Characterization of community exposures can be difficult to assess when widespread transmission is occurring, especially from asymptomatic persons within inherently interconnected communities that report states. In fact, the report suggests that the direction, ventilation, and intensity of airflow might affect virus transmission, even if social distancing measures and masks are used to implement according to the current guidelines. Despite the new scientific information, the CDC Director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and many political authorities are still encouraging people to wear masks. Many states of the cities have even mandated masks, citing them as one of the main tools to slow the spread of coronavirus and keep case numbers and area down. We can see that with Finny-Tunisia, that it has continued to rise, even with you guys making the mask mandatory.
Thank you, Ms.
I don't see them working.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Have a good day. Janet Jackson is next.
Hello.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Ms. Jackson. This is Judge Whitley. It's that time on the agenda, so you have 3 minutes for any comments that you would like to make.
All right. I would like to start with on July 7th. Judge Whitley, you did a press conference in which you were asked some questions, and you said your rights stop when their rights impose on others. I would like to know how our rights of not wearing a mask impose on others, considering all the information that has been provided today to back up that masks are not effective. So I'm going to read part of an article that Judith is going to read the other part. Shouldn't your right to refuse a mask end when it puts me in danger? There's no solid science demonstrating that masked or unmasked individuals are a health detriment to others. Research shows that prolonged close contact is needed for the transmission of the coronavirus. It also shows that masks are incapable of stopping the spread of coronavirus because we have over and over submitted proof that the virus measures 0.06 microns to 0.125 microns. None of these masks, even the N95, only filters down to 0.3 microns. That is like taking a handful of marbles and throwing it at a chain link fence. According to the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy, there's no scientific evidence that masks are effective in reducing the risk of SARS-CoV-2 transmission. It doesn't even reduce the risk of the flu. The center, which addresses public health, preparedness, and emerging infectious disease response, also said that the use of masks may result in those wearing the mask to relax other distancing efforts because they have a sense of protection. That is a lie, because it offers no protection. How does wearing a mask violate your rights? By dictating that someone must wear a mask, it is forcing that person to choose an allopathic medical intervention for the purpose of protecting himself or herself from others. Forcing a person to take an intervention that is potentially harmful for the sake of others is unethical and practicing medicine without a license. Forcing individuals to abide by measures that restrict their ability to move freely throughout society without discrimination, which is a common occurrence coming to the Commissioner's Court, is unconstitutional, which I guess y'all don't understand the Constitution. Prohibiting people from entering and participating in society because they don't wear a mask also violates their constitutional rights. Lastly, for those with deeply held religious beliefs, forced mask wearing violates their ability to abide by natural law and follow their convictions to walk by faith, not in fear, which you continue to relegate fear as your abusive control. You say that we are wanting to educate people about domestic abuse. This is domestic abuse in action right now.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you.
I will now call those folks in person. I'll begin with Judith Shelton, followed by Robert Bucher, followed by Doug Hines. Is Ms. Shelton, I'm assuming, in the back?
Midlothian.
Ms. Shelton, you know, retain your name, address, and then you have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Judith Shelton. Okay, I'm going to continue to read what Janet was reading. The CDC says to wear a mask, so why not listen to them? The CDC and other health authorities have flip-flopped their position on masks several times over the past few months. Although the agency is currently recommending mask wearing in public, it has been unable to produce compelling evidence showing that masks worn by healthy individuals stop the spread of viral illness. Further, when you look at the science behind masks, wearing one to stop the spread of coronavirus makes no sense. Masks are incapable of stopping the life cycle of a virus, and there is zero evidence to support the theory that masks worn by healthy people stop the spread of disease. Thus, many people who choose to not wear a mask are choosing to exercise their personal judgment and not participate in a message of fear or false security. Isn't it silly to complain about masks when people are dying of COVID-19? It depends on how you view the body. If you view the body as brilliantly designed and understand that the oxygen is one of the most important necessities for life, then it is in no way trivial or selfish to want to protect your breathing and your health. Surgeons and Asians have worn masks for years. Why can't you? Face masks are worn by surgeons because they're supposed to make wound infections after surgery less likely. According to Cochrane, a global independent network that produces systematic reviews and other research to inform health decision making, the purpose of face masks is to is twofold. One, to prevent the passage of germs from the surgeon's nose and mouth into the patient's wound, and two, to protect the surgeon's face from sprays and splashes from the patient. Thus, the mask is something that is worn by a medical provider in a specialized setting for a specialized purpose. Masks are worn in East Asia for cultural purposes and to limit exposure to air pollution. Nearly 2 million people are estimated to die in China each year from pollution-related illness. Asians who wear masks in the United States have largely done so as cultural crossover. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheldon. Have a good night. Robert Bucher.
Mr. Robert Bucher. December the 1st, does anybody know what's particular about that date? Or maybe December the 30th? I spoke with somebody and they actually slipped up twice on how far this is going to go out. So apparently we're going to be in this for the long haul. Commissioner Brooks, on September the 28th in Commissioner's Court, you talked about in-person for kids' school and the fact that they were not in school at that point in time for their learning was detrimental. And in your bio, you have stated that your bio plays in the breaking of multi-generational cycles of poverty, especially on focus on the early childhood development and the long-lasting impacts of adverse childhood experience and trauma. These masks are doing just that. Look at the 30% increase in suicide rates due to this nonsense. Commissioner Allen, your bio states you have spent nearly your entire adult life in the public service and known for your passion, her diplomacy, and keen ability to get to the root of the complex problems to resolve them. Yet we do not see you solving the issue of an illegal mask mandate, illegal EDD, or speaking out in the checks and balances that's been given to each one of y'all commissioners by the people and the local government code. Commissioner Fix, in your biography you said you are committed to providing leadership. Where's the leadership for your district? Where are you leading the votes against this illegal mask mandate? You support quality economic development because it's a proven tool for job creation, improves property values, it creates sales tax funds, adds value to community, improves the quality of life for the region. It brings increased payrolls, more spending, and creates a better economic for everyone. The only thing that I've seen you vote for is to continue to spend and destroying our economy just based on that alone. You also don't follow the same mandate as our common people do, as shown in some pictures that I've shown previously. I do have some here currently. Commissioner Johnson, in your bio states you take great pride in your position on Tarrant County Commissioner for Precinct 4, West Fort Worth and Northwest Tarrant County, but more importantly, you take pride in the citizens of Tarrant County. You take pride in the position, and that is that. You also stated that you're strong fiscal conservative, but yet each week we see you speak on keep spending for this COVID, but not standing up for the people. We just see that. So September the 3rd, I come across a picture by accident that I'm glad I did, because some people are dead set on the mask. Lovely mayor, no mask, in a facility that you should be wearing a mask. Imagine that. Senator, no mask. Imagine that in a place where you should. Sheriff at the bar, imagine that after the lifting with a kid by the way. Imagine that. Commissioner Vickers, Mr. Wilder right there. River Ranch Stockyards, nobody following the mandate. Nobody, except for us common folk. Time and picture after picture after picture after picture of violations. So that shows you where they respect. They do not respect this mandate. They have no respect for us except for us. Business is getting shut down. 3 bars you say got suspended, make it 4. And these are the upper echelons.
Time's up.
A lot of respect.
Thank you, Mr. Bucher. Doug Hines, followed by Jody, I think. No, it's Jody. And followed by Sherrod Perry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Judge Whitley, Doug Hines, Commissioners. Thanks for having us back again today. Last time I was here, Judge Whitley, you and I were discussing the the business mask mandate that's in effect under your signature. And I asked you then to please revoke it, and I wanted to further discuss that today. At the time last week we were here, you said you would not do so. I said I'd be back this week to ask you to do so, and I'm here to do so again. And here's why I think. We've talked about the facts, we've talked about the spiritual reasons. There's all kinds of reasons we think this is a bad policy and bad a usurpation of the constitutional rights. But let's talk about the practical aspects of this thing. Let's talk about the politics of this thing. There's several reasons why we in Tarrant County, or Red County, should be concerned about your particular order. We have a very unpopular order by the governor that has a mask mandate already in place, as we discussed last week, over all the citizens of Tarrant County. The governor did that. Your mask mandate, Judge Whitley, is on all the businesses on threat of a $1,000 fine. It's redundant. It's not necessary. Those going into those businesses are already subject to the $250 fine pursuant to Judge Abbott's rule. Let Judge Abbott take the heat on this thing. It's not popular. For keeping Tarrant County red, he's not helping. But you keeping us in this business mask mandate is not helping the cause for keeping this county red. I don't want this county to become the next Houston. I don't want it to become the next Dallas, or worse yet, the next Austin. We who want to keep us in the right place are urging you, Judge Whitley, to please abandon the business mask mandate. Again, it's redundant. As we talked about, masks don't really work, and we don't need it. And what's happening is, because of the $1,000 fine, they're ignoring the actual mask mandate exemptions in businesses throughout Tarrant County. And the way that works is, with the threat of a $1,000 fine out there, people like me who have medical exemptions, we are getting carte blanche refused entry to many businesses. I was kicked out of a business yesterday after I paid for something. I just went in to pick it up. They threw me out. I've had the cops called on me in various businesses with my medical exemption in hand several times. Now, next time that happens, I'm going to call the cops on them for not taking into consideration the actual exemption in your mandate and in our unpopular Governor Abbott's mandate. But I'm here to tell you, we can solve this, take this thing away, do your own thing, do something like Judge Todd did in Ellis County. Judge Todd just made a statement, he just made a press release. Let me read the relevant parts. 9th of this month, Judge Ellis said he calls for 100% reopening. It's past time for businesses to be wide open for Texans to enjoy life as we once knew it. I'm requesting Governor Abbott to fully reopen all businesses to 100% capacity. It's not the function of government to deprive citizens of civil liberties, but of every Texan to utilize sound judgment and personal responsibility on how they live their everyday lives. I urge you to revoke the business mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Jody?
Judge, I hope your mask mandate was not made with an eye toward keeping Tarrant County red. If so, good luck with that.
I don't know what to say. I mean, from a standpoint that it's become such a political issue, and it's not that, and it should not be that. It is, again, my feeling that the masks are helping, and that's why I've continued, and businesses have told me that it makes it easier for them to talk with customers when they are not wearing masks, and so that's one of the reasons. That is the reason why I believe, and it doesn't have anything to do with politics. Jody, please come down.
Although public officials apparently are maybe charged with controlling the spread of infectious disease, they're not responsible for individual health. Only individuals can decide what measures are in their best interest, and health policy shouldn't strong-arm them into taking certain measures they wouldn't choose as free people. Policies that mandate compliance for the greater good are dangerous. One person's health cannot be sacrificed for another's, and no one's life should be privileged over another's. As such, the decision to wear a mask must be a personal one and should not be universally mandated. These measures are meant to protect the community, supposedly, but as a whole they're ineffective because they're hurting individuals within the community, such as Doug talked about. I personally just went to a store. I called them and said, I'm on the way. I needed something to go onto my bed, just a simple thing, because my back and my neck, from the stress and from every bit of trauma I've endured, including this unlawful mandate. And I said, I'll just pull up. I'm not ready to have a fight. I'm just going to pull up on the sidewalk. You come out with some, samples of what I need to buy, and I'm willing to spend some money because I'm not going to do this anymore. They come out. Now I've got this lady a foot from my door, and I don't have a mask. Now she's going back in with this infection I supposedly have to infect everybody. But if I was in there, I would have been 6, 8, 12 feet from people looking at the same thing. So it makes no sense. As you know, I've been here many times, and I've told you I've lost my kids because of judges and their unlawful orders. My rights weren't terminated, but I got no visits with my children. Luckily, I met a little young gal named Rebecca in Grapevine that was a foster parent, or a foster child at one time. She's now a young mother of a 3.5-year-old boy and a 7-month-old baby. She allowed me to be in the room when that baby was born, cut his cord, name him. I got to name him. And I'm with these people all the time. And I can tell you that 3.5-year-old boy is not going to preschool because of the mask. She won't let him. I can tell you that this 7-month-old who used to smile, from the time he was 4 months old, he was meeting every milestone. Every milestone. He's not smiling anymore. I've asked her what's wrong. She goes, I don't know. He's not doing the smiling anymore. We go into a store. I've got my order from my doctor not to wear a mask. I've got not only one, but I got 2. And she puts on her mask, and that little Levi lets out a blood-curdling scream. And I said, why is he doing that? What's wrong? Is he hurt? She goes, he does it every time I put on this mask. So you're causing attachment trauma in these little babies. And these same children that are having attachment trauma will turn into an evil monster like my ex did with the attachment disorder, taking children and doing other horrible things to children. That's what you're creating.
Thank you, Jody. Sherrod Perry. Morning.
All right. Good afternoon.
All right, afternoon.
Okay, so a lot of my thunder has been stolen by all the previous speakers. So I can kind of cut to what I feel is the heart of what I wanted to talk about today. And I've actually mentioned it before a couple weeks ago. Like I said, at this point, a lot of evidence has been presented to you that the masks are doing more harm, and they're actually extending and prolonging this whole pandemic. And I know that you obviously have stated that you feel the exact opposite of that. And last week, I did ask you, to kind of maybe name some, or like to sort of like identify some of your sources. And you didn't, but I want to identify some of my sources of information. Again, because I'm not a doctor, but I want to refer to some folks who are experts. A couple of OSHA experts by the name of Tammy Clark and Kristen Megan. Again, they are OSHA experts. They actually specialize in the use of PPE, protective equipment. They did a viral video a few months ago, and more recently they were interviewed on a news show called The High Wire, which incidentally that show got banned from YouTube, but it's a news show, and you can still find it on they have a website, thehighwire.com. And one of the points I wanted to take from that interview is that they emphasize that these masks, OSHA experts are the ones trained on masks, not doctors. And so they train doctors and industrial workers on the use of masks and the safety of masks, and the proper and what protection they provide. And they were emphatic to say that these masks, that the way we're using them in a community setting, they're actually increasing the spread. because again, they get contaminated. And then, just like actually Dr. Fauci said, as this gets contaminated, you're breathing it in, you're breathing through it, you're touching it, you're filling with it, you're adjusting it. I mean, so there's part of that. A lot of people, and think about children. Do you think children are not filling with this and pulling on it and tugging on it while they're in school? I'm sure they are. They're children. So again, they emphasize that this is actually helping to increase the spread because of the way we're using it. All right. And not only that, they also said that it changes your breathing patterns, which puts more stress on your lungs and heart. So again, a lot of these other points have been made before about the pore size, how this is a virus can go right through this thing. So I'm not going to belabor all those points. But again, to me, the point that I keep emphasizing and why I write this on my mask, right, is because to me this is really a psychological operation, as what they call it. The shirt I'm wearing maybe also tells you that where I'm coming from on this. People might call me a conspiracy theorist, but I've looked at this long enough, and I do see this as part of an agenda to subjugate all of us and actually make us sicker, make us beg for a vaccine that will also make us sicker. And this is an agenda that essentially, in a nutshell, is about, again, killing and enslaving millions.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
And those people will be your children and grandchildren if you don't at least look into what I'm telling you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Okay.
And just on the one hand, I would tell you that the doctors, the head of the medical societies in Dallas County, Tarrant County, Collin County, Denton County, the president of the American Medical Association, and those are just a few of the folks that I talk with and am using their advice. So thank you.
Okay.
The next is Francisco Latimer. That's a comment. Mr. Manius, if you would please read that into the record.
Members of court, this is from Mr. Latimer. In last week's meeting, Judge Whitley stated that he talks to various people regarding the mask mandate, among other COVID issues, and he respects the opinions of those people. My question to the judge is this: why do you not respect or consider the opinions of the many citizens that have time each week to speak out against the mask mandate? It seems that you are only talking to and considering the opinions of people that will tell you what you want to hear, instead of listening to the citizens that are losing business or otherwise being negatively affected by the mandate. The citizens are well equipped to make their own decisions regarding the health and safety of themselves and their families. The government should not be dictating to them when, where, and how they should be protecting their health. The local government should also not be so quick to impose even stricter measurements or measures than what the state government has recommended for safety. Thank you for adding more characters to this form.
And then finally, the last for today is Troy Paul.
And these are Mr. Paul's comments. How did any of us live so many years without wearing a mask? It is because we have an immune system that has protected us for all these decades and humanity for millennia. Some say that these times are different, that the coronavirus necessitates such measures. Really, the coronavirus is no more deadly than the annual flu, for which we do not wear masks. Mr. Whitley, I know you cannot rescind our governor's mandates, but you can certainly rescind the mandate that you have placed on the citizens of Tarrant County. The time is well past for us to move on from this nonsense. John, that's all the audience participation forms that I have.
Okay. Then, Mr. Manius.
Members of the court, if we can now go to item number 2 under the administrator's section, we're going to ask Guidehouse to begin their presentation. Rachel, are you going to make it today?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. So good afternoon, Judge and Commissioners. This is Rachel, and I'll be presenting our deck today. If we can advance to the project status slide, we'll get started. So we'll begin with the week of October 12th to 16th. We continued our ongoing communication with stakeholders. We continued to monitor grant opportunities that would be a good match for Tarrant County. We also continued to monitor for new Treasury guidance and to review COVID-19 expenditures for the county. And we also continued to provide support for the ILA distribution program and the NGO assistance program. We continued a number of ad hoc eligibility reviews, and we also continued to support the FEMA project worksheet. Moving on to our current activities, last week we drafted the presentation materials for the 1014 municipality office hours. We provided clarification on some Treasury requirements for incurring expenses by December 30th. We supported a municipality in developing justifications for their CRF eligible expenses. We completed the standardization of NGO application reviews, which will ensure consistent documentation of the county's decision-making process for the county's records. And we developed expense projection resources for the county in order to help anticipate CRF eligible cost. We also finalized the transition of the FEMA reimbursement request, the submission from the county's team to Guidehouse. So as of this week, Guidehouse is taking on the submission of FEMA project worksheets, which are the forms that are submitted to FEMA that include the costs that the county will seek reimbursement for from FEMA. And going forward next week, we're going to be including a slide that gives a bit more information on the status of the county's FEMA various reimbursement requests and the stage that the Guidehouse team is at for each one. So also this week, we reviewed the eligibility of CRF expenses by municipalities. We also facilitated a discussion on internet connectivity and digital learning programs for CRF programs, and we provided support in the development of the county's new rental assistance program. And just a note on timing there for connectivity in the rental assistance meetings, those were later rescheduled for this week, and we are on track to have those done this week. We also supported the submission of the county's response to FEMA's questions on the county's first reimbursement request to FEMA. So the county's FEMA team submitted their request, and this is a summary of reimbursements that the county is seeking from FEMA. FEMA replied with some questions asking for a bit more documentation or justification on certain items, and the county submitted last week their reply to FEMA that explained all of the expenses that they had and justified them and so on, and made some adjustments to the total summary of costs they were requesting in this PW. And so we assisted with that process. And as I mentioned, next week we're going to create a separate slide just for FEMA so we can provide the court with regular updates on our progress. Moving on to the week of 1019 to 1023, I'll just do a brief overview of these to avoid repetition. In the coming week, the Guidehouse team will continue to move forward with a number of ongoing tasks with an emphasis on providing support to the FEMA VW, the ILA distribution program, and the NGO assistance program. Our areas of discussion today will be the pillars of focus and the county spend update. Are there any questions on this slide before we move on?
Yes, Rachel, this may be for GK, and this may have been shared and I don't recall, but who is the county FEMA team? Just categorically, not a list of names, but categorically, who makes up the county FEMA team?
So
I may defer to GK on that one.
So the FEMA team consists of representatives from our office, representatives from risk management, representatives from the auditor's office, and also emergency management.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this slide? If not, we can move on to the next. So this is the Tarrant County Pillars of Focus, and this slide captures high-level updates from the county's CRF programming. There are no new high-level updates on this slide, but as the court knows, the county is actively working on CRF programs that are coming out soon with support from Guidehouse. Are there any questions on this slide? If not, we can move on to the grant opportunities. So in this slide, we have an overview of the county's grants. There are 2 new awards to report, and you'll see those in the bottom 2 lines there. The county received an additional Community Development Block Grant, also known as the CDBG grant from HUD. This is the 3rd grant that the county has received in specifically related to COVID, and the amount of this one is $3.9 million. The county also received a $1.6 million award from the Center for Tech and Civil Life, which is in support of elections. So these grants are at the notice of award stage, and so as those, the awards are finalized, we'll provide an update on that as well. So you'll see those updates in the next coming weeks. And expenditures related to these grants, including CRF, are captured on the next slide. Any questions on this slide? If not, we can move on to the expenditure slide. So here we have our overview of county expenditures related to COVID-19. The total expenses have increased by about $3 million since the previous week, and the new total is $128 million. And of course, this includes both expended amounts, which is $103 million, as well as encumbered amounts, which is $24.6 million. And I also just want to note that this table includes all COVID-19 related expenses. So these include expenses against some of the restricted grants on the previous slide. And this also includes expenses that we anticipate might be covered by FEMA that are located here because they have not yet been, until FEMA is finalized, then we would try and split them out into a separate line. Any questions on this slide?
Rachel, let me ask a question about, I was talking with JPS yesterday, and they have received some COVID money, CARES Act money, but they're concerned that their return trigger is whether or not they ended up with more money, more revenue than they did expenses. And so the question becomes is whether or not the tax revenue that they get counts as revenue for that trigger. So that's one question. The other question then becomes, they've got some FEMA dollars that they feel like they can recover. It requires a 25% match. We've been able to use our CARES Act money to achieve that match. They're concerned about using the CARES Act money because until they get the answer to this first question, can we transfer or can we grant money to them to reach their match?
I see. So on that first point about the funds that they have received from the CARES Act, do you know if is it a provider relief fund that they've received?
Say that again.
Do you know which type of funding they received from the CARES Act? We know there's some provider relief funds that went to hospital and health systems. There's also a few other types of funds that went, and they're all going to have some different requirements.
I think it was the provider relief fund.
Okay, so I'll look into that and see if they can use their those funds for the match. But otherwise, I believe that, because if the expenses that are being incurred by JPS are CRF eligible, then I think I'll have to confirm this, but I think we might be able to use the county CRF funds for that match, but I do have to double check that one.
And I think y'all are doing some work for JPS too, so you may have somebody.
We are, yes.
If y'all would just kind of, let's focus in on that if we could.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get an answer to you this week. Any other questions on this slide? Okay, if not, we can move on to the next one. This is our last slide, brings together the county's revenue and expenses. Beginning with FEMA PA, as we mentioned in previous weeks, the county has submitted its first PW, which has been moving along in the process, of which 75% is allocated to FEMA PA and 25% to CRF as the local match we just talked about. So this right here, this number, the earmark is the 75%. I believe it will be decreased just based on the feedback from FEMA and some eligibility. We're going to shift some expenses from FEMA to CRF. So I'll update that in the coming week to make sure that's correct. But here we have that 75% portion that are earmarked. And then in addition, we estimate the county has about $8.8 million in eligible expenses that may also be FEMA reimbursable. Moving on to CRF, the county has spent $88 million from its direct distributions. Separately, we estimate the county has an additional $20 million that is CRF eligible expenses. And also shown here under eligible expenses is the 25% local match required for FEMA. The county still has $76 million in budgeted CRF funds, leaving an estimated $27.8 million to be allocated. And so that 76 million is what has not been spent from the funds that the court has allocated for its various pillars. And finally, the county has been awarded about 24 million in additional federal funds, and you saw these on slide 3. These are separate from FEMA and separate from CRF. And the county has spent about 4.5 million of these funds, leaving about 20 million to be spent. And these are, as you know, restricted grants, and so these are considered earmarked expenses. So in total, the county has spent $128 million, with 92 million earmarked, leaving $27 million approximately remaining. Are there any questions on this slide?
Yes, Rachel, I'm confused. There is a footnote there that says as of October 13 and October 16. What date goes to what numbers?
Yes, so October 13th is the date that we ran the expenses, and we have the update from the county on the grants received on October 16th. So slide 3 is based on information from October 16th, and here we're using that as revenue. So where we're showing the remaining amounts, that's based on the revenue received.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
I'd just like
Any other questions on the, oh.
Yeah, Rachel, I'd just like to point out one thing to the court. On that slide under multiple grants, that slide, the expenditure of those grants are not necessarily limited to December 30th. Some of the HUD grants that we received, they reach out to 2021 and 2022. So I know we're running, we always watch that end date of 12/30, but that's for the care relief funds.
That's correct. And so as you'll see, the remaining amount for the relief fund and the remaining amount for where you see the larger blue pie chart, that's the total amount, those match because the only amount remaining is based on CRF.
Other questions for Guidehouse? If not, let me give you a quick update on where we are on our 4 pillars. Let's start with the small business assistance. Our county has approved 2,196 grants for the first round of the small business assistance program, and the county has distributed $17,624,000 as it relates to that. We intend to begin round 2 of the small business grants. The portal will open next Monday, the 26th, and I believe that it will close on Tuesday, November 10th, and that will give us time to process those grant applications and make the distributions.
GK, on that regard, who are we excluding from applying for those grants?
Those individuals who have already received funding out of the first rounds, and Lisa.
Judge, we're not excluding anybody that we didn't exclude the last time. We are not adding to that list. We're actually adding to eligibility. We're including the franchises, the independently owned and operated franchise businesses that meet the qualification of 25 or less employees will be eligible to apply this time. As you mentioned last time, the bars, any of those type of businesses, as long as they meet the eligibility requirements in terms of 25 or less employees, those are eligible businesses in the first round and in the second round.
Do you have a list of businesses that are excluded?
We have a list that says ineligible businesses. Yes, we do. It's listed.
It's types of business.
So that's what I would like to see, because I was under the impression that bars were excluded the first time. So please give me a list of those.
I have that.
And then I've got some question as to whether or not I think we should not increase the $10,000, and I know that might mean that you have to go back and allow folks who put in from the last time. But I mean, now that, especially from the standpoint of the bars were closed down for 6 months, and so in my mind, that's just something that I'd like to at least discuss or have some conversation about.
I don't think we could start the program on Monday the 26th because you're talking about reprogramming the application.
Did you hear that?
I can't hear what's being said, no.
So if we were to change the amounts of money that we provide people, we would not be able to open the portal on the 26th because we've made the various changes and we've run the testing model, so it would delay the opening, which would shorten that window. The important thing about the window itself is the November 10th date, because that would allow enough time for the applications to come in, and the auditor's office and our office will start working them as soon as we get the applications. But it would give us enough time to make sure that we work the applications and we disperse the money prior to December 30th.
So if we moved it from 10 to 20 or from 10 to 30, what do we have to change on the application besides changing the number from 10 to 30?
We would have to change whether or not if they received a previous award, that they would be eligible, and then it would be comparing the previous award to the new amount that they would be eligible for, and they would be resubmitting their information. I'm not saying we couldn't do it, but again, we envision that December the 18th is our date to have to be finished in order to have the list ready for the court to meet on December the 28th to approve all of these payments prior to the December 30th date, if that's not extended. Keep in mind, we also have the rental assistance program and all the other programs that also have those same deadlines. We will have to have a complete list of all rental people who are going to receive funding on the 18th. There's a lot of stuff that has to come together here. So if you want to change this, we'd have to go back to Guidehouse or Wise Hive, different group, and see what we could do with the programming and change up all of our checklists, and we would not be able to start next week. We also have Thanksgiving and Christmas in between all of that.
Can we leave it alone?
I guess we can leave it alone, but I don't, and I will go back and look at it a little bit, but I don't understand why changing from 10 to whatever the new number is changes anything other than the fact that the application's still going to come in.
But the previous awardee may have gotten 5, they may have gotten 2, they may have gotten 7. So there's a reconciliation of what the previous awardees received if we're going to increase the amount and allow them to be eligible.
But that doesn't slow down the application
Well, the
process.
application that we're testing right now does have a question, did you receive funding? And that's a hard stop, because if they did, then they are out. The application is, so we would have to change that process. And I think it's important to realize that if you recall, we had over 5,000 people that had started the applications the first time, and they found it very complicated, and so consequently we only had about 2,900 that actually completed the application. We're hoping that this is what we're going back out for. Those people that couldn't complete the application the first time, who didn't hear about it till late, and we felt confident that we're going to be able to use up that $12 million that we have left, $12.4 million we have left in that $30 million originally allocated, with the applicants that couldn't apply or couldn't figure out how to apply because of the streamlined way that the auditor's office has developed this application.
I hope we spend more than $12 million, because I'd be willing to allocate more to that based upon the money that we still have left to distribute.
Well, one of the things that we have done, as we get these in, and we've had some discussions at staff level on this, is that I think 12.4, that's the remainder of the authorization. We're not going to stop at 12.4, because we want to start, as soon as we get these things processed, we want to make sure the money goes out the door. And so if we need to come back to the court, we believe we have enough flexibility in other areas to overfund that particular small business assistance grant.
That's the point, Mr. Main, is we need to be able to spend all of this money.
Oh, yes.
If we have to move it from category to category, we need the flexibility to move it. But there are some areas where we have underspent dollars, and I would like to see money going out at an increased rate. One of those areas is rental assistance, which I assume you're going to get to in a minute.
Yes, sir, we are. And members of the court and Commissioner Brooks,
the goal, and we talk about it in staff at least 3 or 4 times a week, is to make sure that at the end of the day that we expend all of these funds. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about, I'm sorry, is there any other questions on the small business
Well, I'll
assistance?
go ahead and say, okay, we'll keep it where it is, but I think, again, the bars were closed for 6 months. The other were closed for 6 weeks, and some other businesses were closed down for longer than that. So, but I will leave it at that, just because I don't want to make it any tougher.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, then we're going to go to the testing, and I believe that you all have received this informational sheet.
Now, you indicated you were going to get the rental assistance. Is that coming later?
Yes.
Okay.
We're simply following the order on this sheet.
Well, I see rental assistance right after small business grants.
Okay, so if you look at the bottom of the first page, it has COVID-19 testing.
I just want to make sure, since I don't have the benefit of seeing what you're holding up, this is what Redmond sent out, what your team sent out?
This is something that, yes, Commissioner, this is something that Redmond sent out last night to all the court members.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing. Sounds good. I got it.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, just to report on the testing piece, you can tell that this past week with both the Arlington side, the North Richland Hills side, the TCC South side, and our roving sites with the City of Fort Worth, we provided an additional 7,714 COVID tests. That's a weekly number. If you turn to the second page, which is the rental assistance, and this is something that you brought up, Commissioner Brooks, the numbers are increasing. They're not increasing as fast as we had intended to have them increase. So what we have done, we have allocated more resources and have somewhat of a management change as on-the-ground program management change on this. I think that you're going to see these numbers come up substantially. And not only are we working with the JPs, but we're reaching out to the apartment association and the apartments themselves so that we can go ahead and get more applicants in. We're working with the City of Arlington and asking them to help us on this, because you might remember Arlington did not get any COVID money, and so we have a good relationship with that. We've extended a contract that we had with Arlington that's on this agenda today that allows them to provide manpower to assist. And I think that you're going to see a significant increase in these numbers.
There is a problem that I am very much trying to mitigate the impact of, and that is that there is a moratorium on evictions that is in effect till the end of the year. Because of that moratorium, some tenants, I dare say a lot of tenants, have stopped paying their rent. And to me, that says that we're just kicking the can down the road, that we're going to have an explosion of evictions whenever this moratorium is allowed to expire. The problem is that our money expires December 30th, and our ability to deal with that explosion of evictions that comes in the first quarter of 2021 is going to be much lessened. So if we can make an impact on that building deficit now by paying as we go, then maybe the explosion will be reduced?
So let me tell you what we're doing at staff level, because we're focusing on that same issue. First of all, we're making direct contacts with the apartments and the Apartment Owners Association to make sure, because you might remember, rental assistance is a two-party agreement before it comes to the county. It has to be the tenant and it has to be the landlord. And so we're reaching out to the landlords to tell them that if you are experiencing what you just explained, that we need to talk to both groups, because we can step in and provide assistance. Second of all, this week we authorized a substantial increase in our marketing efforts in the rental assistance program, where we're trying to get the word out in as many ways that we can to ensure that people are aware of this. That because there may be a moratorium on evictions, but that doesn't mean there's a moratorium on you paying rent.
No.
Because
it's going to accrue.
It comes due. And so we're focusing on trying to get that word out. I think with the type of resources we're putting together and a new program manager in this that is a fairly aggressive person, that I think we're going to be able to see some substantial numbers.
Who are you putting into this?
I'm sorry?
Who are you putting into this?
Kristen Camarano is going to be running the day-to-day on this. And we have added, I believe, 2 or 3 additional management analysts to it. We're helping the auditor's office staff up on their people, because they do the secondary and the final evaluation. So if I think I saw 3 additional new people downstairs yesterday in the auditor's office. So that's the things that we're doing. We're not simply just letting this run on an as-is basis. And our goal is to get the numbers up, and we're going to be talking about another thing in just a second on this particular item that's going to deal with rental assistance also.
Okay, GK, I wanted to add that I've seen some emails exchanged back and forth about my request for a draft marketing or outreach strategy plan, because not to minimize what's been done, but it's apparent that what we've been doing isn't reaching as many folks as we needed to Commissioner Brooks's point and to yours as well. So I talked with staff last week in preparation for having to try to have some type of review of a draft, and then also in discussion with to have a discussion with Commissioner Brooks. We're here and we can help, but we need something to start with this next step, and perhaps that's what you're going to speak on in just a minute. But I'm gravely concerned about our numbers right now, and I get that you can build it and people have to come, but I know that there is more that we can do. We just need to put it to paper and to activate it.
Commissioner, we'll have that marketing strategy to you by the end of this week.
Thank you.
And we'll provide that to all the court members. Okay, are we ready to go forward, or are there any other questions on? Okay. So the non-governmental assistance program, we've had those issues that we've handled all the applications that we have in-house except 2. I believe that Redmond, are we going to be bringing some more into court that deals with the housing finance group that you all gave us some additional people to look at? We're doing that. Currently, we've spent or allocated $6.8 million. Now, we have 2 big ones that we're working on. We work on them, and it's just they're complicated. But one is MHMR that we're going to be bringing forward also, and this is really in the municipal distributions with the cities, and also the 911 district. So you're going to see a substantial request probably coming from both of those. Where we are on those 2 issues, that we're talking with the city of Fort Worth. You know, our general agreement with the city was that if we had programs that were county-wide that affected both the city and the county, that would be a 60-40 split. And we just want to make sure that that we provide the city of Fort Worth with the necessary documentation so they feel comfortable doing the 40% split.
I had a discussion last week with Vinny about the immunization clinics that were closed as a result of COVID and now need to be reopened. And I suggested to him that since those were COVID-related expenses, that perhaps he might ought to investigate whether they were eligible for CARES Act funding. I'd like for y'all to take a look at that.
Was that the conversation we had the other day? Yes. Okay. So, yes, we are looking at that particular item, and if we can provide COVID funding, well, then we'll move in that direction and bring that to court. So that is the end of the Care for Tarrant report on that sheet. I do have one action item as it relates to this particular agenda item. Your Honor, we're ready to move on that?
Go ahead.
Okay. So we have an item, and we've included it in your packet this morning, and we sent it out to both Commissioner Allen and Commissioner Johnson. We're requesting that the court approve payments on behalf of CARES Act rental assistance applicants who otherwise meet all program requirements but have voluntarily vacated the subject property after applying to the program but prior to application approval or approved assistance reaching the landlord, and view and discuss the Care for Tarrant program weekly status report and the presentations of Guidehouse. Okay, so what we're asking for is that there are some situations where individuals have applied for relief, and prior to that system getting all the paperwork in and approving that payment, that individual was not evicted, but they voluntarily moved out of the apartment, and our goal is to come back now and that apartment owner to make them whole for the rent that was not paid. And so
I don't have a problem with that in theory. My practical problem with that is whether that person actually moved of their own volition or whether they were constructively evicted by the landlord by such tactics as changing the lock on the doors, or removing the door, or cutting off the utilities. Those are tactics that property managers have been known to use to circumvent the eviction process. And they would say that the person moved out voluntarily, but it ain't necessarily so.
Is this something that the individual who moved out is some acknowledgement that yes, they moved out? Because I agree with Commissioner Brooks. I want to help the landlords out, but I find it hard to believe that the tenant just said, okay, golly, I'm going to move out and move into someplace else and have to pay rent. I see Kristen just really wanting to come up and say something. Come on up, Kristen.
That prompted this request for action was an individual who himself reached out and said that he had moved voluntarily to live with a family member in order to prevent incurring additional debt and to avoid possible eviction at a future date. So in this particular instance, which is the single one that we know of right now, that is the case.
So we're only doing this in this one instance right now?
No, this would be a precedent for the program. We are asking for, if it does come up again, that you allow us to go ahead and approve, or allow the auditor's office to go ahead and approve payment.
But how much of a payment are we approving right now? Is it only for this one individual?
I think
So
the action is for you to make a policy change.
That's
We
right.
didn't bring you the specific individual.
That's right.
We envisioned that we could have other individuals that fell into the same category, and the program was silent. I will point out that the tenant actually has to certify as
That's right.
well the reasons for their behind and that they left the premises. So the tenant will be interviewed, is my understanding.
That's right.
And will provide information as to why they were.
That's right. So if we see some sort of a trend to Commissioner.
Simply ask those questions to make
Yeah.
sure it didn't occur.
Given that,
Okay, so I'm only able to pick up part of the conversation, but I just want to make sure before we move forward that I'm understanding you. We're saying that this would only, that we would have to get some verification from the tenant that they in fact elected to move. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct, Commissioner.
And I'm satisfied with that, as long as that takes place.
We'll make sure it happens.
and that's a motion.
Yes, I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And members of the court, we have one final item, item number 3. I'm going to ask Ms. Wortham to come forward to make this presentation.
Miss Wortham.
Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. So we are requesting approval of the agreement with Christian Community Storehouse for the distribution of coronavirus relief funds as a part of the NGO assistance program in funding amount not to exceed $25,552.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Ms. Wortham. We didn't eat you.
Now, I know the next thing is Ms. Tidwell, but I look back here and I see that on a day when we're early voting, we've got Mr. Hyder Garcia sitting out there, and I apologize. I think we should have brought you up much earlier, but if it's all right with court members, I'm going to say bring him on down now, and we'll go from there. Hyder, come on down. I didn't mean to run off budget and risk management.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the court. We have one item for you today. We are proposing to the court to amend the early voting schedule as allowed by Section 85.067 of the Texas Elections Code. Back in September, we talked about having a plan in case the turnout looked high enough that we felt the last 2 days of early voting would be something we wanted to anticipate and deal with in advance. So looking at the early voting turnout that we've had, right now we are over 290,000 people have voted. The slowest day has been, was last Saturday, when we had 40,000 people almost vote. At 40,000 people a day, we are going to be well over, I would think, it's not crazy to think that there's going to be at least 500,000 people to vote in early voting. Now, whether those people continue to come in, 40,000 every day, or whether we're going to see a drop next week and then a spike the last 2 days, I cannot anticipate. But given that we have seen some long lines, and given that statistically we've always seen a spike on those last 2 days, my recommendation to the court is that you approve this amendment of the schedule and that we open those 8 sites the last 2 days to anticipate for a spike. It's not wasted work, of course, if we do it. Those are 8 election day sites that at least, if anything else, we would leave pre-set up and ready for election day, which helps us a lot. So that is my recommendation to the court, and of course, if you have any questions, I'm here.
So, Hyder, I do have a question. Were we able to evaluate having those sites open for longer than 2 days, like starting earlier in that last one of early week?
We did reach out to them, and we couldn't get all of them to agree to more than 2 days. In fact, basically no. The answer is no. None of them were available more than 2 days. Some of them reluctantly, but we felt that the best way was to open them across the board the same amount of time because again, right now what we're anticipating is that spike in those 2 days. This is not something where we're trying to, or we didn't plan for any specific spot or region in the county. We just said if, as traditionally, those last 2 days we have a spike in turnout, what could be proposed to the court as a reaction to, as a preparation for it?
So how do we determine what the 8 new sites are? You've given us a comprehensive list, but I can't tell from that what the 8 new sites are.
They are listed. I'm not sure I understand the question, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
What are the 8 new sites?
The sites that are
on the bottom of the schedule, the proposed schedule, the ones that say with special days and hours 51 through 58. So it's the
51 through 58?
Yes, the
All
ones
right.
that the schedule says that will open just those 2 days. So we spread them
And
around.
kind of we also share how those particular locations were selected.
So we try to cover as much ground as we could. The initial thought was at least 2 in every commissioner's county. I believe the actual number in the end is there's 3 in 1 and 1 in 4 because if I recall well, one of them's geographically still kind of spread around, but yeah, they don't cross the border of the commissioner's precinct. But that was the goal, to have coverage around the county and not focus on one specific area, just 8 sites spread around the county.
I move approval.
I know Commissioner Fickett had some questions. Sorry.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Commissioner Fickett. Well, you wanted a question about something.
I had something totally different.
Okay.
Okay.
Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Don't go too far.
I do just want to. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Fickus.
Commissioner Fickus?
Yes. Hyder, yesterday, I sent you an email yesterday morning concerning some things that happened in the city of Euless. You had called me Tuesday morning at 7:10 a.m. to tell me what was going on and gave me a brief overview. I didn't hear anything else out of you, so I made the assumption that things were fine. That was the wrong assumption, obviously. Your response to me was no response, in my opinion. And I would just hope that if we have an issue in my precinct, something that you and I have already discussed, that you will respond to me and not delay that response like you did yesterday.
Understood.
I thought that was somewhat inappropriate.
Understood. Clearly an opportunity for improvement for me. That morning we were advocated at finding a replacement crew, and I definitely could have done a better job of reaching out to you immediately, and the city mayor and the city manager. So that won't happen again, is what I can tell you right now.
Have you talked to anybody with the mayor or the city manager in Euless?
Not yet, because the letter they sent was addressed to the judge, and I felt that I wanted to give the judge the opportunity to tell me first because they addressed it at him. So just
He and I
respect
talked about that
formalities.
this morning. I plan on talking with the mayor and did suggest that he be in communication with them.
But I'm definitely going to reach out to them today because I do owe them an apology for that.
Well, I think you need to contact them also.
Well, yeah.
And that probably should have been done yesterday morning,
Absolutely.
if not earlier last week. So.
Don't disagree with that assessment, Your Honor.
Some things that we've talked about, when it comes to the whole COVID-19 and the way we're approaching that as regard to that, I've had a number of places where I've mentioned Stylus and I get this quizzical look. So I don't believe your workers are emphasizing to the people that they're supposed to use this stylus to vote, as well as sign the poll books. And so I think there needs to be some additional training of the staff. You and I have talked about this, but I just want to go on record, is that I wish that we could at least take one machine, separate it away a little bit from all the ones that are very close together. And so those folks who choose not to wear masks can vote at that one, but that all the folks where the machines, I get the constant complaint I get is we're supposed to be social distancing, and I've got 2 or 3 people in line that are sitting there with no masks on, and as opposed to at least the ones that have masks on are in the machines that are not 6 feet apart. What you've said is that you've got 300 extra machines out. As a result of that, there is no way you can take a machine and separate it off. And I guess I would just, I've said I'm going to go by and visit some sites. I would ask that the commissioners in the sites that are in your area, masks are obviously something that I believe in. I'm taking beatings over this every week. But if somebody is not wearing a mask, we can't tell them to. We can't prevent them from voting unless they do. But I would certainly like to see those a machine set up for them that does not, again, put them in the middle of folks who are wearing masks. That's just kind of where I'm at on that, and what I would hope that would happen.
Like I said, we've looked into it. To keep those lines short, we've added the equipment that we calculated we needed, and we're certainly right on the limit. The long lines are telling us already, we're right there in certain places, right? Some have shorter lines than others. So my point being, the only way it looks like, and I will start probably visiting those sites personally, but from the instruction that was given to the technicians, hardly any site has any room to create that one machine separated gap. I will go visit them personally, but if we can't, the question is, would this court want me to remove one to create a gap between the last one in the chain and everyone before them? That's probably the only thing that looks like we can do at this point.
It would certainly be my preference that everybody who voted wore a mask. But I am very sensitive to voting rights, protections, and equal protection under the law. I am not convinced that you can treat persons who don't wear a mask differently in the cause of voting than you treat people who wear a mask. That seems to me to bring up some constitutional problems. And it makes me nervous.
You might also find that a number of people who don't want to be jammed in that are wearing a mask would prefer to go use an isolated machine. I think it works both ways, and I don't see how you force or mandate somebody without a mask to go to that isolated machine.
I think it's at least questionable, to leave it at that.
If we're going to start,
I'm sure we'd get some
start defining law, then let's let the lawyers do it and not. If that's
I never purported to be practicing law.
Come on down.
I said I personally had a problem with it.
I think Commissioner Brooks raises valid concerns, and Ficus, I do. It would not be the recommendation that we treat those wearing masks and not wearing masks to use different machines, at least not to mandate it.
Because when I get the calls, I'm not going to say to them that the DA has said that we cannot set a machine aside for those folks who are choosing not to wear masks to vote, and that we can't equate social distancing?
I think it would be more appropriate to say that we would not recommend it.
Well, that's not what I'm asking you, is what your recommendation is. I'm asking you what the law says.
You can do whatever you want, but we would not recommend it because it poses concerns about constitutional voting issues. So, is it possible to do it? Yes. But does it raise legal implications? Yes, which is why we would not recommend it.
Okay. Raises implications. I mean, usually you'll say, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't. But in this situation, I hear you kind of hedging your bet. I mean, you've opined that basically we can require the masks. A lot of people have said that violates my constitutional right. Your thought in that matter is, no, it doesn't. You've got the authority we interpret that you've got the authority under the law. So I'm just trying to figure out whether you're saying or not that if someone doesn't wear a mask, we're not telling them they can't wear a mask. They can't, if they're not wearing a mask, they can't vote. All we're saying is if you're choosing not to wear a mask, here's the place, here's the machine that you will, or the machines that you will vote on.
I think that any further discussion of this would be more appropriate in our closed session.
Okay. Then we'll set it up. I don't quite understand. I mean, it's either you're recommending or you're not.
I'm not recommending it.
Okay, then we'll just leave it right there. Anything else for Hyder at this time?
Yes. Hyder, will you talk a little bit about some of the observations you've been able to make so far about curbside voting?
Curbside voting, we noticed that I think a third or a little under a third of curbside voting was requested at the Mansfield Sub-Courthouse. That was on Saturday when I looked at the date at the end of the day. So we've added 2 people to that location dedicated exclusively to curbside, because that's obviously being under high demand there, to see if that alleviates those. That's the place with the longest wait time right now, the Mansfield Sub-Courthouse. Hour and a half, 2 hours, some people say more. So that's what we're feeling might be causing some delays there. So we've, again, added these 2 people to help with that. We can't fit any more equipment there to alleviate in any way.
Sure, and I just want to add, because I have received a lot of questions and concerns about what's going on at the Mansfield Sub-Courthouse. I know you and I have talked at length on multiple occasions, and I'm hearing from folks at the local level, state level, doesn't matter, which is great. I still have not been able to pin down the exact origin of the misinformation that Mansfield did not get the number of polling locations and the number of machines that they were supposed to. Mansfield did get the number of locations, so the 1, and the number of machines as originally planned. Hyder can evaluate if anything more could be done. It's important to mention that there are many factors that are affecting wait times, not just obviously the higher voter turnout, but then any number of things related to someone's specific ballot or the new elections equipment, which it's not new to us, some of us, but for others who perhaps haven't gone since 2016 or 2018, it's new. And there's obviously still there is a learning curve with anything that's new, not saying that it's necessarily substantial. And then we have a number of competitive Texas state house races that are in play that perhaps could be driving voter turnout. So I think when we talk about wait times, we have to be sure that we're remembering that there are many factors that affect that. It's an issue that I'm monitoring very closely, and especially as it pertains to the Mansfield Sub-Courthouse, but really any location in Precinct 2. and we're doing all that we can to make any changes that are possible to ease the wait time. So I just want to be sure to mention that. Otherwise, I would say generally speaking is that folks have understood the wait time is somewhat a function of just the critical issues and all the races on the ballot, and that folks are just operating their right to vote. And so aside from a few different locations, at least from the feedback that I've received from folks in Precinct 2, is that folks are feeling good about the way things are going. Obviously, we're going to learn a lot from this election, not just in what the results yield from what's on the ballot, but just in walking out these steps. And we'll continue the conversations as to how we address and kind of the culture of elections in Tarrant County.
I appreciate that, ma'am. And to follow up on those comments, two things where we can ask the public to also, consider. One, I don't say this enough, get your sample ballot, know what you're voting, especially, in Mansfield, I believe there's 7 propositions. I mean, there's a lot of interest in down the ballot races, and that may be adding time, which could explain why that site processes less people per hour than some other sites. And two, and again, just options that are on the table for everyone, there's the free rides to the polls program. So there is an option, at least on the table, for those who want to take it to go a little bit further and find one of those sites that's having 20 minutes or less wait time. Probably faster to take a ride paid for by the county to another site, vote, and come back than waiting over an hour at Mansfield. Not ideal. We don't want to vote close to home, but it is an option on the table.
Doesn't the Mansfield ballot have something like 20 different city things on there?
It has, if I recall, 7 propositions, and the mayor raises up, and it has some.
It has city council races, mayoral race, and 7 charter amendments. So, obviously we know that because of COVID, the municipal elections got pushed, and so the ballot is super long, and in some cities it's even longer, which I know that obviously from just anecdotal, what I've heard or have been able to gather is that most of the voters at the Mansfield Civil Courthouse are from Mansfield, Grand Prairie, Arlington, Kennedale, which will kind of make sense. That's obviously not the entirety of the representation, but that's mainly it. And so, it's taking some time. And it probably will continue to, especially as long as the ballot is. There's no straight party ticket voting. You've got to click through every machine. So again, this goes to some of the other factors that we have to consider when we think about the wait time, and then perhaps some things that are more unique to to folks who are voting in Mansfield.
How many additional sites are you opening up down in that area?
2, one in Arlington, one in Mansfield. The Mansfield ISD is the one that's closest to that courthouse.
Further up on Broad, Judge.
Okay. Well, with those extra long ballot in Mansfield, it could be a nightmare on election day.
Yep.
So if there's any way of maybe getting another site.
Yeah, and at the rate we're going, we have probably by now 300,000 ballots cast. If we keep doing 40, 50,000 a day, if it doesn't drop, we're probably going to be 500,000 or more by the end of this week, or this weekend at least.
Okay.
That's 500,000 people that are not going to show up on election day. So again, the push for everyone is vote early, vote early, vote early. That's the main thing right now.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one. I don't know where I picked this up, but I heard this morning that only somewhere around half of the mail ballots that were mailed out have been returned. Is that
60%.
correct?
60%, if I remember well. I just looked at it. I'm sorry I closed it, but it's like we mailed out 80,000, and I believe 50-something, 60 are back. It's 60% is the number I remember I just did.
50%.
Yes. 60% has been back. Usually we see about 2/3 in previous, so we'll keep seeing what comes in. But the signature committee has done a fantastic job. They might be caught up with all of those by the end of the day today, if not tomorrow. We're doing a great job at looking at signatures and getting them ready. So another important piece of information for voters out there who've mailed back a ballot, look at the website, get your status. Some people are wondering if they should go vote in person to make sure it counts. If you've mailed your ballot back and you don't have it, you're going to do a provisional. But if you look at the website, you might find out that it was actually already approved by the ballot board and save yourself the trip. So go to the website and check.
All right. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, thank you very much.
Auditor.
We have two items for the court this morning. The first is that we're asking that we approve an increase to the Sheriff's Office Travel Petty Cash Fund from the $10,000 that it currently is to the $20,000 as outlined in your court communication.
Move for approval.
Second.
Commissioner Brooks, would you do the honor? Display.
Please vote.
There you
go. Commissioner Allen.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And our other item is we're asking the court to receive and file the Tarrant County financial statements for the month ended, for the period ended August 2020.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
And Judge Whitley.
And Judge Whitley.
Thank you,
Please
Commissioner.
note that Judge Whitley was out of the room on the previous vote.
Move to receive and file personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Good morning,
Yes.
Ms. Glenn.
Good afternoon.
Motion passes unanimously.
Judge, if I could just take 1 minute to remind our employees that we are in the process of beginning annual enrollment for benefits. So all employees should have received their packets in the mail. If you haven't, please reach out to Amber Duckworth in our benefits division, and she can assist with that. Just a couple of dates, important dates that you need to make sure that you record on your calendar. So enrollment actually begins October the 29th and will end November 11th. So I'll repeat those dates, October the 29th through November 11th. So please make sure that you get your enrollment done. And it's just a reminder, once we go through this enrollment process, those will be your elections for all of next year, for 2021, unless you have a qualifying event. So those dates are important. Please see us in benefits if you need assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beecham.
We have 5 items for consideration today. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for bid 2021-22. It's a bid for SAP Success Factors Learning Management System for the IT department. Recommendation to be awarded to Phoenix Business Incorporated, amount of $162,175. If approved, we're also seeking contract approval from the court.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 2 is also a bid award recommendation for bid 2021-95. It's an annual contract for OEM heavy-duty equipment truck parts and supplies. Recommendation be to award on a discount from list price, awarding to the primary and secondary vendors by section as shown in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second. We have motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3 is also a bid award recommendation for bid 2020-197. This is an annual contract for urine, hair follicle, nail, and sweat patch drug testing for juvenile services. Recommendation to award on a per unit price basis, awarding to J&B Rapid Testing.
Move approval.
Second.
We have motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 4, also a bid award recommendation for bid 2022-17. It's a contract for a trailer-mounted wet jet and vacuum excavator. Recommendation would be to award on a per unit price basis, awarding to the 2 primary vendors who shown in the court communique.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Last item, number 5, is also a bid award recommendation for RFP 2020-221. This is a contract for rideshare services. Recommendation would be to award per the terms of the contract, awarding to Irving Holdings Incorporated, which is a Yellow Cab.
Which is what?
Yellow Cab.
So Irving is not a geographic descriptor.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it is, or yes, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
Really?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Brooks, will you repeat your question?
I was asking if this company was located in Irving.
And it is.
I believe yes.
It's Irving Yellow Cab, I think, is the...
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Jack, I understand you're going to be, as they say, getting on that hog and riding down the trail.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for the many years, and I want to thank you the way you handled your business. I hadn't always agreed with you, but you've always had a good answer when I've asked you. So,
Well, when I turned in my letter to Judge Wells last Monday, bittersweet. When you come to some place for 25 years, it's special. I love what I do. I'll never replace the friendships or the professional relationships that I've built in the county. And the highest compliment I can pay every commissioner's court, present and past, and the purchasing boards, are that you let me do my job. And you had my back, and it's pretty special. Thank you.
Well, you've done a great job, Jack, and is it the end of November?
Yes, sir.
don't spur that hog too hard.
Well, heck, he won this. Didn't y'all win this week? Y'all beat Ole Miss.
One more. Yes, we did. Good game. I was there. Trees were turning, beautiful. I sat way up high.
Fortunately, LSU didn't play this week, so
well,
we didn't get the chance to allow somebody to do 600 yards.
We've been practicing social distancing for the last 4 or 5 seasons. We got that down. But one prediction: McMillan, Redmond, you're going down in 2 weeks. That's all I got to say.
Okay. Thanks, Jack.
Are there any appointments?
Yes. Two subcommittees of the IT steering committee, and Judge, I understand that you and Ms. Tidwell have already discussed these changes. So I would like to recommend for the ERP subcommittee that the new chair would be Judge Whitley and the vice chair would be Commissioner Allen. For the eGov steering committee, the chair would be Commissioner Allen and the vice chair, Judge Whitley. That's a motion.
I'll second.
Say what?
Appointments are made by the chair, which would be me.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Please vote. Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. I believe that's it. I don't believe we have any other public audience participations at this time. So with that, I will recess our open meeting, proceed to close to discuss items exempted under Section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. Megan, if you're back there, flick something. Having returned from our closed session, there being no business to conduct at this time, we stand adjourned.
IT steering.